I'm Luke Storey. For the past 22 years, I've been relentlessly committed to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of spirituality, health, psychology, and personal development. The Life Stylist Podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. Brian Richards, we're finally doing it, dude.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, I remember meeting you years ago. God, this must be 5, 6 years ago at a conference in Pasadena, and you had all these, you were at your SaunaSpace booth, and you had all these laminated sort of slides in a book, and you were breaking down your knowledge on the light spectrum to me, and I was like, holy shit, I got to interview this guy. And then we've seen each other, you know, over the years and hung out a bit, and
Yeah.
shocked that it's taken this long, but we're finally doing it.
Yeah, I think that was the Bulletproof conference.
Yeah.
And that was in the very early adopter ages or stage of my company. I drove my Honda Element with my trade show booth and my wife and son to LA from Missouri, and you know, ran the whole booth by myself, set it all up. I made all those slides, like so yeah, that was very much in the formative stages when the product was still, you know, very early adopter, very conceptual, very bricolage. But since then, the company has just really come into its own and really been, it's kind of shocking, actually. I have to pinch myself sometimes, but it's 2022. I have like 42 employees. We have a huge manufacturing shop now. We have a new inventory warehouse and actually a little showroom that's going to be opening pretty soon. That's in Columbia, Missouri, all of that. But the product ships worldwide. You know, it's an interesting concept that I stumbled upon initially because of my own health problems, really, and sort of seeking a solution that wasn't prescription drug based. You know, something that really got to the root cause of things. I had So I had what you would call adrenal fatigue, I suppose. It's self-diagnosed, but I had weird acne on my torso, kind of around my kidneys, and I had insomnia and mind racing and fatigue. I was kind of lethargic and irascible, and yet I was really young. I mean, I'm not that old yet, but this was when I was, you know, this was 10 years ago or something, and so it didn't make sense to me. What's my problem? And if you met me on the street, you'd think, well, what's your problem, dude? You look fine. You look great. You know, you look healthy. But no, I wasn't. And then all these things, I didn't feel good. And so at some point I got recommended to take Accutane or something like that.
Oh man.
It's pretty much been taken off the market, I understand now.
I hope so.
It's associated with liver cancer. So that's
Brutal.
like, yeah, that's a sort of a microcosm of the pharmaceutical world, right? And so that really bothered me. And I said, you know what, I'm going to figure out my own thing. And I did a lot of research online. And I kept coming across sauna, this concept of purification of the body, and that perhaps one of the biggest contributing factors to disease is environmental pollution, and pollution in our bodies. And we know chemical pollution is out there, but it turns out there's lots of types of pollution, you know, electromagnetic pollution, for example. All these things. So this was in the early stages. I had no idea about EMFs, by the way, back then. I had no idea about red light back then, or photobiomodulation or mitochondria or anything like that. I am sort of classically trained in the sciences and math and science, but from a physiological perspective, all that, I didn't care about any of that. I just was looking for something to make me feel better. So in any case, sauna, right? So I was like, okay, I'll build my own sauna. You know, I can figure this out. I'm kind of a tinkerer. And right before that, I kind of stumbled on what I do now, what is SaunaSpace now, and that is actually called the electric incandescent light bath. And it was invented by Dr. John Harvey Kellogg in 1891. So incandescent light bulbs were invented in like 1887, the modern version with the tungsten filament and the vacuum gas-filled glass chamber. That was like 1887, and electricity kind of at the same time, right? And then 3 years later, Dr. Kellogg looked at these and he's like, these lamps, these bulbs, there's something special about this. Let's use these to power a sauna. And so he also invented the electric arc light bath. So he had different types of incandescent bulbs. Arc lamps are much hotter, you know, they're much more of a blue ultraviolet spectrum. But he was trying these different things. Essentially, in short, in his sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan, he set up his electric incandescent light baths, and over a period of years in the first decade of the 20th century, he ran like 50,000 invalids through it, which is a word that we used to use for sick people, people with disease. And he healed everything he came up against. And he has a whole protocol that he built down, and he discusses this hundreds of thousands of sauna sessions that he, you know, each one he was observing and his team was recording. And he wrote about all of it in a book called Light Therapeutics, published in 1910 by Dr. Kellogg. And you're like, whoa, light therapy, 1910. Man-made light therapy too, based on, you know, the incandescence of the sun in nature. And then the concept was kind of lost and forgotten in time, along with many other things, actually. You know, we know that with the rise of the American Medical Association, essentially, you had a lot of alternative therapies that were kind of ran out of town. You know, they used to have cancer spas and sanitariums of different types where you'd go, little, you know, sanitarium hospitals where you'd go and heal all across the U.S. And all of those were kind of stamped out by the late 30s, 40s, and 50s and disappeared. Chiropractics, for example, disappeared, came back finally in the 70s. But yeah, so there was this, there's also the work of Dr. Arthur Dinshaw and others. There's some really famous guys who dug deep into this light therapy stuff, the fact that we're plants, you know, we can absorb light not just for energy but for repair and recuperation and so many other things. And they understood this, Luke, like 120 years ago. So what I do now, what SaunaSpace does now, literally has, it's first of all, it's the first electric sauna that was ever invented from a technological perspective. And it also is, you know, it being the first, it has over 120 years of safe use. So those of you who are skeptical out there about this concept of the incandescent sauna, you know, what we do, it's proven itself time and time again, you know, and it's not just used as a sauna. It's used for, you know, farmers use it to heat livestock. In the racehorse industry, you know, you have these animals that are very expensive and they have to, you know, if they get an injury or something that's really problematic. So they've been using these to heal wounds on racehorses for 50 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the whole concept of the photon, the single lamp therapy that you use, not just the sauna with 3 or 4 or 5 lamps in an enclosed space to promote sweating, but the single lamp therapy, the targeted therapy concept, that dates back, you know, a long time. You know, so many of us have grandparents who used to know about this. These when you had a problem, they would just take a heat lamp and put it on that area. Now you kind of see them in some bathrooms, but again, the concept was kind of lost, even though it was so fascinating, it was so effective. And so you can look into all of that. There's a real famous light therapy kind of focused on the eyes and the skin research doctor named Alexander Wunsch.
Oh yeah, I interviewed him.
Yeah, you've interviewed him. Yeah,
Fascinating guy.
so yeah, and he has this he has a presentation he did for the optical society, the ophthalmology society of America or something. It's on, I think it's still on Vimeo, where he shows these amazing records and photos and stuff of people like healing, you know, these big arc lamps and people like sitting under them in 1910 and 1905, and they're healing lupus vulgaris. So lupus used to kill people, you know, back in the day. And so even before, excuse me, even before electricity, they understood about light therapy. Our ancestors understood a lot about light therapy. So, and I'm not talking about thousands of years ago. I'm talking about just pre-electricity. If you had lupus and you had some other skin conditions, they would use red stained glass and put that on the window. So you'd sit in front of a window that had red stained glass, right? And you'd sit and you'd absorb the rays of the sun, and the red stained glass filters out almost all of the ultraviolet and blue. And so what comes through, it's this healing component that we call infrared, near infrared particularly. And so they were healing 100% these diseases, you know, like lupus that you could die from, you know, using an informed understanding of light, how light heals, you know, how we're healed by light. This whole, in the scientific world, they call it photobiomodulation. So that's light controlling biology. And but for short, light therapy, or most people know it nowadays as red light therapy. So anyway, so I built my electric incandescent light bath, right? This little bricolage, a little tent thing that I made, plumbing pipe, banana clips, chicken wire. There was, it was pretty fugly. And yet I used it right before bed, and it totally, like, I slept amazing that night. I was like, huh. I used it again the next night. Slept even better. And in fact, in just a few sessions, I felt like my insomnia had been cured. It was just gone. It wasn't an issue anymore. Where before I'd lay there in bed and, just my mind would be racing. I wasn't really like depressed or anxious or anything. I'd just sit there. I'd be thinking about all this stuff and couldn't fall asleep. So I was so intrigued at that point that it fixed this problem that I had, this inability to sleep well and go to sleep easily, that I began to use it every day, pretty much 4 or 5 days a week, long sessions, 35-minute sessions, and even longer for many months, probably 6 months. And it was at the end of it that I realized, wow, it was probably like adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout a lot of people have, where you're basically toxic and you're low energy, and your adrenals don't respond well to the hormonal signals anymore, and you're just kind of worn out. You're worn out like a worn out rag, and you need a reboot and a reset. So my acne was gone. My skin looked a lot better, better than ever. And then the things that I didn't know were a problem, when the car is dirty and you throw a little more mud on it, you don't notice, you don't see anything. But once the car is clean and polished and looking awesome, your self-awareness, your sensitivity to the world, to yourself, and where you're at physiologically, mentally, and so forth, that it gets better. And so I didn't realize that I had brain fog, and I did. And all of a sudden my energy levels were really high. I didn't have any lethargy anymore. I was more patient, even with my mom. This sort of irascibility that I had, this bitchiness, that totally went away. And I was just like, wow, I'm like, I kind of achieved what I think everybody wants, whether you're a man or a woman, whoever you are, everybody just wants to look and feel better. It's a simple thing. And so the question is, like, how do you get there? So for me, this was my aha. I was like, wow, this thing works really well. And that led to sort of making a few for friends and family. And then I eventually got asked by this doctor to start making him, sort of. And I was like, at this time I had moved to Columbia, Missouri. I grew up in Montana, so I grew up in the cold, but I had a wanderlust period for many years, traveled abroad, and eventually came back. And then I had my story where I built the sauna and stuff shortly before I moved to Columbia, Missouri. I was in, at the end of Montana and Bozeman. Then I lived in Urbana, Illinois for years, kind of a strange place called Chambana, from my wife's yoga instruction that she was into, a really famous teacher there. Anyway, so this was right after the crash, 2008. Do you remember that, with the houses?
Yeah.
And so we moved to Columbia, and I was like, real estate, that's a sound investment. And everything was crashed. So we bought a couple of houses, my father and I was going to fix them up. I was the sweat equity. He was the capital, and I was sitting there fixing them up, and then this sauna thing came up, and unlike being a landlord and fixing up houses and stuff where you have to deal with people, and there's sort of I didn't really have the emotional constitution to be a landlord, like the people and the rent and all that. I'm just kind of a nice guy, like. And so on the side here, there's this sauna thing, and so it was so different. Instead of rent collection and trying to fix up things, and I love to fix up things really beautifully, only to see them summarily, like, totally trashed by the one bad tenant out of many good tenants, and that's just the way that business is, right? Anyway, so with the sauna, I would send it out, and they were really, again, they were very simplistic in design and build quality and stuff. And people would call me up, and they would be like so grateful, and they'd be crying, like, you changed my life. And so I would get paid up front, right? And send this out. And then I just experienced such incredible gratitude from these people I was helping. I was like, I am not doing the housing stuff anymore. I'm going to go into this. I'm going to like double, triple down into this thing. So in the beginning, um, you had the email. I had a little PayPal email. You had to email me on Dr. Freeling's website. And then we would talk by email, and then I would send you a little PayPal invoice, and then I would send it out for you. In the beginning, I would go to the dumpster of the downtown appliance center, where outside they have their like beautiful refrigerator boxes, like huge cardboard boxes. I'd take those and like painstakingly like slice them inside out and make my own custom box. So like it looked trick when I sent it out,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
I'd build it all myself. I hooked up with a local upholsterer who's now my design partner, Rusty, who's a really awesome guy. I've been working with him forever. Who would sew the covers. In the beginning, though, the covers were 2 painter's cloths from Home Depot and banana clips and PVC pipe and just regular heat lamps from the store. And I built it myself, right, and sent it all out. And it was a thing that slowly grew, such that in 2014 I got my first small business loan. I actually got approved for a small business export loan. Those of you who don't know this, if you export uh, any of your product, I had sent like 2 or 3 saunas to England. The volumes were not that big or anything at that point, but because of that, I was qualified for a small business export loan, which means the government underwrites 95% of it instead of 80% of it. So the bank was very happy to give that to me, But I got the first small business export loan that any company in Missouri had gotten in like 20 years, because who makes anything anymore in America, right? Who exports it? So that was my journey in the beginning. I got the loan, and then I bought this wood cutting robot, this huge CNC machine that like cuts wood, and it's computer controlled, and I got a laser engraver, and I hired my first employee, and that did not work out very well. Let him go, after 6 weeks or something, but slowly, continually just held on to the good, wasn't satisfied with what I had, kind of clawed my way forward. I ended up getting 3 business loans over the period of, the last 6 or 7 years. We almost went bankrupt like 2 times. One time I had to borrow like $10,000 from my mother. It was, super, super humbling, really humiliating actually. But I did what I had to, and so, but then we slowly improved the quality of the product, and we got some endorsements, some pretty cool ones. Dr. Mercola was a big one. Jack Dorsey was, using it, and he was talking about on Ben Greenfield's podcast at one point. So somehow we crossed the chasm, that you've read that book, where we kind of transitioned from early adopter in branding and quality and all that stuff to more of a mainstream product. So yeah, like right now, I was just recently at the South by Southwest Wellness Expo. They have a Wellness Expo component, and we have a huge booth, it's like 20 foot by 20 foot. And I've got my team there that I'm actually able to afford to pay people to come, versus me driving myself in my little tiny Honda. It's really, it's been an incredible ride to get to this point. It's really been a dream come true. It's been a lot of tough moments and a few gray hairs, certainly. But for those of you out there who think, you can't build something, or you can't make things, or the only successful companies are like software or something like that, it's not true. It's just, it takes, it takes a little bit of grit. There's this book called The E-Myth.
Oh, love it.
Yeah. So just wearing those 3 hats of technician, manager, and entrepreneur for a long time, it took, but yeah. And now I'm here. I'm like here with you. I'm in Austin. We have many challenges ahead. During the COVID era, the supply chain issues have been really frustrating because we're a tangible good. I've got over 200 items on the bill of materials, the ingredient list to make the product. And, the vast majority of it's all custom made, from the light guards to just all the different parts, all custom made, because the difference between the SaunaSpace sauna and Dr. Kellogg's electric incandescent light bath is one of user design, really, more than anything. His was a huge Victorian style cabinet, like the size of half of this room, and it had, 30 or 40 different light bulbs or surrounding you would stand in it. It was just this big thing. And I was like, well, this is really awesome. This research says sauna's amazing. Photobiomodulation super amazing. It's doing so many things. It's so strongly supported in the literature, but people think sauna is a luxury, like it's too expensive, it's too heavy, it takes up too much space, you know, and then for folks who are, it's invalid to some degree, whether they have autoimmune or they have physical impairment or for many other reasons, they can't use a regular finished sauna that's 180 degrees, it's wet, it's hot, there's no light therapy, there may be EMF issues or whatever. So I wanted to make a sauna for everybody, and that was the old tagline back in the day. And so I immediately was thinking portability, in the beginning. And that's kind of what we have today. It's basically a portable red light therapy sauna tent.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've been in a temporary living situation for the past year since moving here. Hopefully, knock on wood, that's about to end. But I only had room for a couple things in this place in terms of, tools that I like to use on a regular basis. And I have your sauna in the second bedroom. It's a very small room and it takes up probably 1/4 of the room, but like out of the hyperbaric chamber or any number of things I could have put in there that I like to use on a regular basis, that was an easy decision, and actually used it last night.
Nice.
So I thank you. And I wasn't expecting to kind of explore the journey of getting here from where you started, but I think it's really important for people, especially right now where so many people have lost their vocation or are kind of starting over, rethinking their lives and their sense of purpose and what they want to do with themselves. And I love the story of someone with an idea that starts with nothing, just this etheric idea, and seeing a need in their own lives, fulfilling that need and going, wow, I just fulfilled a need I had. There must be other people with the same need, and putting in the perseverance and, as you said, grit to actuate that and put it out in the world. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's a really inspiring story. And not that everyone has the entrepreneurial spirit either. I mean, I think some people like having a job because there's a sense of security in that. In other words, working for someone else. And
Sure.
I see the value in that, and I've done that. But as someone who has a difficult time having a boss, I always identify with the entrepreneur. I'm like, just invent something, think of something. So that's very cool that you shared that. Going back to the light, because I want to really, I think what's unique is that you've obviously created something that gives you heat and sweating and the traditional benefits of sauna, but your understanding of light is super keen, and I'm obsessed with light. But going back to some of the historical points, I remember interviewing early on, it probably was in my first 10 interviews, Nadine Artemis, and she was telling me how there used to be these hospitals that practiced, I think it was heliotherapy, where they would, I forget if it was MS or whatever it was. Maybe it was rickets or something. I forget the actual pathologies that they were dealing with, but they would literally, these hospitals were just sunbeds, and they just roll everyone outside and put them in the sun, and that would heal them. And that, for some reason, that stuck with me as someone who I just feel so good when I get, I don't tend to burn, but I always like to say safe sun exposure. I know some people are more fair or they haven't built up that solar callus, but I've noticed how much just getting in natural light has benefited me, that it's become really like a therapy. And also in that observation is thinking about when most people go on vacation, with the exception of going somewhere to ski or snowboard or something, where do we go? We go where we tend to gravitate toward the equator, where there's more sun, higher UV index, and we want to be around water. It's like the water and light thing. There's something innate in our biology that drives us there when we want to rest and restore and also just be happier, So I think there's so much medicine in exploring light. So within that, based on your understanding of the different spectrums of light, maybe a place to start would be, what sun exposure does for us and some of the qualities of true natural light, not what we think of natural light, like a room like this with windows, but being exposed to your body being exposed to natural sunlight, and also this ancient practice of sun gazing where you're actually utilizing the red light
Mm-hmm.
spectrum of the sun.
Yeah, and the light eater cults too. Yeah.
Yeah.
We, in modernity, the modern, in the West, particularly in the West, in the Western civilization, but and particularly like in the last 100 years with the scientific revolutions and now the technology of revolutions and now the information revolution of the internet and all that, we as humans, not you, not me, maybe, but in general, we've developed an arrogance wherein because there's so many technologies that have improved our lot in life, air conditioning, indoor plumbing, these like brilliant things that have, they're helping us to live longer and more healthy in many ways. We presume that all of technology and all of technological advancement is beneficial, but that doesn't square with our biology, which is ancient. This body is, 1 million years old or whatever, 30,000 years old. Our biology has not evolved really at all in the last 100 years, or really much in the last 1,000 years. Maybe a little bit, but we're still programmed from like the holistic level in our whole body, but also in the cellular level, in our mitochondria, in the quantum level, even below that. We're programmed to get what our ancestors got 1,000 years ago, and I would argue even before that, even pre-agriculture, agricultural based diets that we have nowadays. That's what we ideally are programmed for. But particularly if you look at like the last 100 years, we have a billion times more microwave signal in the world. That's all man-made, what's called non-native EMF. It's not the native electromagnetism of the earth that we're programmed to get. And the long story short is the synthetic world we've created that we live in is unfortunately very deleterious to our health. It's very toxic. But unfortunately, here we are. We have to work for a living. I myself am included in that. I work in front of two huge 27-inch screens for many hours a day. And yet, that's not what we're supposed to get. So what we're supposed to get is the sun, is sunlight, many hours a day. And those of us who have a genetic predisposition to get more sun exposure are darker skinned. So someone who is of African American descent needs 3 or 4 times the amount of sun because they have so much more pigmentation in their skin that is really a defense mechanism from the killer wavelengths of the sun, ultraviolet and blue. But nonetheless, that's the case. So you saw that with the COVID era that folks with African American descent were more inclined, it appeared, to be more immune compromised more easily, particularly because they are living in the same, those who live in the U.S. are living in the same Western synthetic world where we live indoors all day long under blue fluorescent LED light, and it's all this toxic junk light. So, but back to your question, to the sun, it's like, why does the sun help us so much? Most people think it's vitamin D, which comes from the ultraviolet light, which is ionizing radiation. The truth is, when it's in the winter, people get more sick. They're more indoors, right? Vitamin D levels are down, and that's true. And vitamin D is great. We know people, will supplement vitamin D when they get sick, when they have illness or whatever. It's very successful. But what else is going on? Because ultraviolet light forms a very small percentage of sunlight, and blue light as well, which ultraviolet light and blue light are right next to each other, right? You got ultraviolet light is, whatever, 200 to 400 nanometers or so. And then you have the visible light spectrum, and that's Roy G. Biv backwards, right? So blue is right next to ultraviolet. It's not quite ionizing radiation, so it doesn't damage your DNA directly. But now we know that's why people wear blue light blockers and such. Blue light causes free radical formation. Even in the very mainstream world, they call it high energy visible light, which I understand you have your own really sick glasses now. So
I do.
Super,
gilded. The
yeah.
blue blockers gilded, yeah.
Gilded.
It's funny, when we were going to do this interview, I was like, I should bring my glasses because we're having a little show and tell. And for those watching the video, we're going to be testing some of the spectrums of light and light flicker and stuff like that. But yeah, I took it upon myself to make some blue blockers that I thought were cool looking and scientifically valid.
Yeah, more power to you, because it's super, it's not optimal to be in front of blue only light. And so let's get into that. So with the sun, a very small percentage is ultraviolet and blue. What happens to form the largest plurality of sunlight? Near infrared light. So it's actually, if we go back to the spectrum, we have from high energy, high frequency, going to low energy, low frequency, longer wavelength. We have like gamma rays and X-rays and that crazy stuff, and then ultraviolet light, blue light, visible light spectrum, which the lowest frequency, the lowest energy is red. And then we get into what's called the infrared spectrum. It's and the first chunk of that is called near infrared. And it's near infrared, it's referred to as near because it's next to red. And of course, these names and these bands are a bit arbitrarily defined by us human scientists, but nonetheless, the fact of the matter remains, if you look at the sun spectrum, it's this big bell curve with this long tail into infrared, and it peaks in the visible range. And 41% of sunlight is in the near infrared band. And if you add red light to that, which is like 11, 12, 13% or something like that, you have the majority of sunlight is either red light or near infrared light. And so these are, that I think is its own statement. If you look at the nutrifying power of the sun nourishes all life on Earth, right? There wouldn't be anything without the sun. What's the biggest component of sunlight? It's near infrared. Some red, but mostly actually near infrared. So high energy infrared. And there's also certainly a fair amount of the mid-infrared and the far infrared. So if we look at the sun, it's like, okay, in the winter, we're low vitamin D. We're not getting enough of that, but we're not really getting, I mean, it's not so much the ultraviolet and blue, although those are important, dose dependent. Blue light is important for building up melatonin production in the pineal gland during the day. So we are designed to get some ultraviolet and blue light, but it doesn't really promote all this regeneration and healing and repair and recuperation as does the near infrared and red light via the mitochondrial activation systems, which are in every cell of the body. So basically, the biggest chunk of sunlight just so happens to, number one, stimulate mitochondrial responses in the body, and we'll go into that. There's mitochondria in every cell of the body except red blood cells, but also the same narrow band of near infrared, particularly the 700 to 1,000 nanometer infrared, is the deepest penetrating of wavelengths into biological tissue. So if we talk about doing light therapy in the brain, right? What's the brain protected by? The skull, the thickest bone tissue in the body. Red light doesn't penetrate bone tissue. It doesn't really penetrate more than skin deep. It's the near infrared wavelengths that, due to what's called the optical window of the human body, they penetrate, much deeper, 4 or 5 inches into the body. So if we're talking about doing light therapy into the guts, the deep regions of the body, inside of the bone tissue within which you have mitochondria, inside of the brain, it's not really red light that does that. It's near infrared, which is again the biggest chunk of sunlight. So what we get from the sun is in terms of the most powerful component of it is this complement of wavelengths that are red and near infrared that form together the majority of the sun's emission. And they're if we're naked underneath them, we're not covering ourselves with clothing, it's promoting an incredibly wide array of healing effects, immune activation effects, anti-aging effects, inflammation reduction effects, all these things that some of those are the biggest contributing factors to disease. And here we have this built-in brilliant system that doesn't take drugs, it doesn't take anything else, it takes light. So it turns out we're plants, we eat light. And so you have these light eater cults, and you have the sun gazers and all this stuff, and a lot of that's kind of been suppressed, in the modern era. Like, put your sunscreen on, take your, when you're in pain, take a pill. when in fact you can go outside and you can activate all this stuff just by being formed by this understanding that there's this healing component of the sun. But then it's more complicated than that. Of course, there's definitely a synergy to the sunlight, and there's a certain way we're supposed to experience it. The ratio of red near infrared to blue ultraviolet changes throughout the day. And Dr. Wunsch has a great slide that he shows that in one of his presentations. The highest the highest concentration or the highest percentage of red near infrared during the day is, guess what? In the morning, sunrise, and in the evening during sunset. So the best sunlight to get, regardless of your skin type or your ethnicity, is that morning light, up until like 10:30, 11 a.m. Once the sun starts to rise in the sky and it reaches its zenith of midday, you have the maximum amount of blue and the least amount and ultraviolet, and it starts beating down us and it wears us out. And that's why we rest under the shade of the tree during the day. Of course, nowadays people sit at the beach at 1 p.m. and cook themselves and they put sunscreen on and all that. But our ancestors understood, the best, most healing stuff is in the morning, kind of in the evening, kind of need to hide and rest during the day. And at the same time, look at our bodies. We're hairless. Well, we only have a little bit of hair on our nether regions and on the top of our head. So the hair on our head protects us from the zenith of the ultraviolet light exposure a little bit. But otherwise, we're beings, of photobiomodulation. We're supposed to eat light into all of our pores, and every single cell of the body is really craving and crying out for this light. And so our ancestors understood this. But nowadays, modern observation, scientific studies, with all of their limitations, are buttressing the ancient wisdom. Yes, this stuff does work. We have mitochondria. The mitochondria has the cytochrome C, a light receptor protein that has absorption bands only for red and near infrared wavelengths of light. And when you shine this special wavelength of light on it, with a very minimal dose, by the way, you can get a biologically impactful photobiomodulation dose from a fireplace, from a bonfire. And our ancestors understood this too. Like, they lived with the cycle of the sun, the proper circadian rhythm. They didn't have a blue light after dark, but they did have light after dark. It just wasn't blue light. It was the campfire. And so we have 30,000 years or more of a relationship with making our own fire, right? And it was always down low after dark.
That's a really interesting point with not only the temperature of light, but the location of the light. And before I forget to mention it, because we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, you guys can find the show notes at lukestorey.com/SaunaSpace. lukestorey.com/SaunaSpace for all the geeky stuff that we're covering here. We'll put links to everything that we talk about and hopefully some graphics and stuff. But back to the Alexander Wunsch interview, which we'll link to in the show notes. I don't remember the number offhand, but he told me something really interesting in regard to the placement of light. And it speaks to your point that we were sitting parallel or slightly above maybe, a firelight, right? And I was talking to him about what is the future of home design, right? If we really were to fine tune our lighting environment, not only with temperature, but location. And he said, the worst possible place to have lights inside a domicile is overhead lights. He's like, that only happens at solar noon for a couple minutes in nature. Again, going back to evolution, right? It's like that bright light is rarely ever there, but sunrise, sunset, it's kind of on the horizon, sort of
And I think
ahead.
also we have a gut feeling of this, because if you walk into a room and they have like sconce lighting on the wall or low light, there's a romantic ambiance, it feels good.
Yeah,
versus
that's true.
The overhead lights, like, oh, that's weird.
That's so true. Yeah.
For real.
And I noticed that after he mentioned it, I was like, God damn, he's right. When you walk in a room and there's a bunch, especially if they're like bright LED lights, like that's why these in the studio, those are always turned off. Plus I learned that they'll flicker, which we can hopefully test here today. But anyway, I thought that was really interesting is the temperature of the light and actually where they are in our height of vision too.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really interesting. I never thought about that we're actually getting the infrared therapy from fire too.
Yeah. So yeah, we should explain that too.
Yeah.
Like the sun, right? We're talking about the sun. The sun is an incandescent light source, and so is the incandescent bulb. That's why we call it the incandescent bulb. And so is the candle, and so is the fireplace. And so all of these are examples of in science what they call incandescence, which is a very simple concept, really. It's that you in nature, if you heat up a material hot enough, like think of an iron rod, you heat it up in the oven, it glows red. That's incandescing. So you heat up a material hot enough in nature, and it emits light. It emits light naturally, and it does so according to this fancy physics law called Planck's law. And so you can actually use the integral form of Planck's law, and if you know the temperature, so the actual temperature of the light source, you can predict the emission of the light. And so they've done that for the sun, which is 5,500 to 6,000 Kelvin. That's 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever. And when you measure every single wavelength from the sun and you graph that on a power curve, it perfectly matches, the predicted Planck's law curve. And so you can do that with any light source, whatever the temperature is. In terms of incandescent light sources, whatever the temperature is, you can predict the spectrum. So if you look at the sun spectrum, it's really hot, right? 6,000, 5,000 Kelvin. So its peak of its power curve, which is, again, this is what we call broad spectrum light, full spectrum light, they call it. Full spectrum light means the sun is emitting all of these wavelengths simultaneously. It's not like LED light where you have a very monochromatic peak of light, a very focused light, or fluorescent light also. It's like these spiky digital it looks like digital light in the spectrum. It's very stepwise. The light of nature is incandescent light, which is analog, which means broad curve, and all of these wavelengths together in this sort of, again, long curve. So the sun peaks in the visible range because it's at 5,500 Kelvin. My thermalite bulb, that basically custom designed that was a 4.5-year project, by the way, custom tuning the filament to deliver more light therapy than a standard heat lamp.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So these bulbs.
So this bulb's different, and I'm not trying to bust your balls, but this is a different bulb than if I went to like a feed store and I wanted to keep my chickens warm at night.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. With SaunaSpace, that's what we sold you when you bought the sauna till 2018, and I was working secretly, confidentially, on this project, and I just couldn't get it right. So it's mouth blown, hand rolled glass. So it's a beautiful artisan glass that's stained red instead of dyed red. But that's just like quality and maybe some bougie features of the bulb. The unique nature of the thermalite bulb is that I redesigned the filament inside. I kind of optimized it to be near infrared centric. So this delivers, from a wattage perspective, 2 to 4 times the photobiomodulation wattage of a regular heat lamp. And you can feel them side by side. There's definitely more heating wavelengths as well. So it's just optimally designed for human therapeutic use.
Got it.
So this is 2,400 Kelvin. It's half the temperature of the sun. So that curve, instead of it peaking the visible range, it peaks in the near infrared, and it's a little bit flatter. And then with the glass that's red, the tiny amount of blue light that's still emitted by the tungsten filament that's 2,400 Kelvin is filtered out by the glass, so there's no blue light at all. And you can see this on my website, sauna.space, kind of just on the learn page. You can see the sun spectrum and the thermalite spectrum, and how we've figured out how to make it, really near infrared centric. But back to the fireplace and the candle, those are not as hot as this bulb, and the candle is less hot than the bonfire or the fireplace. But what happens to that curve is it just gets flatter, and the tail gets longer into infrared. So you have less and less visible light, less and less ultraviolet and blue, but you still have some near infrared that's there. And so, I forget the article is by Dr. Michael Hamblin. It was a sort of a summarizing article, Friend or Foe, I think it was called, where he goes into this, and he cites one piece of research wherein, like, 0.1 watts of near infrared light still promotes a mitochondrial response, like very small amounts. And so, yeah, when you sit in front of the fireplace and the bonfire, it's not just the heat that makes you feel good. It's the photobiomodulation. You're energizing your cells and promoting this healing and inflammation reduction and all these things that are just like in the brain cells. Photobiomodulation causes release of serotonin and dopamine, so it makes you happier. It also, the near infrared light, for example, which is the only way to stimulate this mitochondrial response in the brain, because that's the only wavelength that gets in there. It does a couple things. It's not just stimulating this healing and structuring the water, of course, and correcting the bioavailability and the functioning of the water for its own purposes in the cells and in between the cells. It's also been shown, for example, to promote a mesenchymal stem cell release from the bone tissue in the skull, and then those stem cells go into the brain cells and work with the photobiomodulation to break up amyloid plaque.
Really?
Which is related to
That's
Alzheimer's.
crazy.
Really crazy, right? So there's that, and then also you may have talked with Dr. Vunch about this. The near infrared light also, aside from the mitochondrial responses, it makes water nutrient delivery more effective. I think that has to do with structuring the water. I'm not sure, but all that to say that, for example, the photoreceptor cells in the retina don't have direct blood supply. They 100% rely on water to bring all their nutrients, and they're very hungry molecules. They use a lot of oxygen. They're working really hard all the time. And so when you shine near infrared light into the eyes, people ask us all the time, well, do I have to wear eye protection? Is this bad for my eyes? Because the sun can damage the eyes, blah, blah, blah. And the answer is no. I mean, if you're getting ancestral levels of exposure, so these are not laser beams and they're not LED, they're more, they're broadband, they're lower power, and they're just more or less what you would get from a near infrared perspective from the sun. It actually is quite beneficial for the eyes. This is one of the things that makes sure that lots of nutrients and enough nutrients get to the most hungry, hardworking cells in the body that don't have that direct blood supply due to the evolutionary design of the eye. So those are just like little microcosm examples, and there's so much research out there that says, hey, we need near infrared light every day. We really need it in every cell of our body. And then if you couple that with the heat, which we should get into, we can talk about a sauna a little bit, but let's talk more about it just from the light perspective, because I think that's maybe less well understood. I think a lot of people understand saunas good. Saunas are great. But with the light, in nature, again, it's all incandescent light. The light of nature is analog incandescent light. You never got photobiomodulation, red light or near infrared light therapy without getting the heating wavelengths at the same time. So here's another example. There's a heat-gated ion channel in the cells. So it lets ions in and out of the cell, and it's triggered by heat. But near infrared light can structure water in the cell, and then a structured water molecule can sit on top of this gate and upregulate the gate. So that's just one example of how clearly our biology is programmed to get heat absorbed wavelengths and mitochondrial stimulating light wavelengths at the same time.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, dude, it's super interesting. So
I'm thinking about the thing I was referencing earlier, where we intuitively, when we have leisure time, we like to go where there's bright sun. And also to the point of the campfire. I mean, we go camping, right? When we want to get away from our day-to-day life we don't maybe realize it, but sitting in front of TVs and devices and things like that, we want to get out into the woods. And so that's another type of vacation, right? You go to Cancun and stay at a hotel and go lay on the beach, right? Or you go to the woods and you go camping, and that's got to be one of the reasons that we love to do that so much. I mean, can you imagine going camping, pitching a tent, and be like, you guys, let's not light a fire. It's kind of outdated. It's like everyone can't wait to sit around the fire. There's an ancestral sort of innate desire to be near that fire and near fire in communion, right? And whether it's, a formal ceremony or just sitting around telling stories and jokes or whatever with your friends and family. But there's there's something that draws us near other than just wanting to be warm at night. There's something that we know is healing and restorative about that fire, about that spectrum of light, as you said, combined with the heat, right? It's just like the best thing ever. It's really interesting.
Yeah, well, we've really convinced ourselves that, we know better, and we're indoors, and we live these synthetic indoor lifestyles now. And there's so many more things that are going on here. It's not just light. We used to have intermittent access to food. Now we have constant access to food. We used to experience lots of temperature changes and not just heat. And we love heat, but the human body is also programmed to get really cold and like deal with that. It's really resilient. And yet nowadays we live under these perfectly climate controlled conditions all day long indoors. And so all of these things are, it's kind of this concept of homeostasis. When you get in, and you build a habit for something, you get stuck into something, or either physiologically from a homeostasis perspective, or just habitually from a habit perspective, you convince yourself that this is the norm, this is okay. And this is the norm nowadays, but it's not normal for humans. It's just been normalized, this living indoors. And so I think, yeah, we're not even conscious of it, how much we crave that ancestral environment that has sunlight, that has light, that has heat, that doesn't have all this crazy toxic blue light, that doesn't have EMF all the time, that and then also, it's like cold outside. It's like, how good it feels, right, to go camping and it's really cold out and you're by the fire and it's warm on your face, but like behind you is cold. You have these just variances in temperature and so forth that is so perfectly controlled in our modern environment that we miss that. So yeah, I think you're definitely onto something there. For me, I was like, okay, well, you can go on vacation. Most people go on vacation maybe a couple times a year, but what the hell do you do the rest of the time? And so for me, it's all I've really focused, especially with this Photon product that wasn't originally available. That came much later.
You referring to the single
The
light,
single
yeah,
light,
that you can
yeah.
set on your
Not just the
desk.
full sauna,
Yeah.
but the single, what we call the photon therapy light. So it's a single thermalite bulb and a fixture that's safe to use and stuff. And the idea is that, hey, okay, we recognize our indoor environments are super artificial, they're super synthetic. How can we make them more naturalistic? Like, how do we bring that naturalism back into the modern world? And so this is a big part of it, and we'll show that here in a little bit with the meters. You don't have to, become a hermit and like reject all the creature comforts of modernity and technology and go live somewhere to be a biohacker, and to live this ancestral lifestyle. I'm all about like integrating the two together, and so bringing things like the photon, into your room and correcting the light that you have indoors has a huge impact on not just your health, but your mood and the ambiance of the area. And so, we need to basically, like, what is biohacking? It's, people think hacking is cheating or something. That's sort of the pejorative meaning of it. But the good part of it is we're really trying to trick our body into thinking it's in its natural environment.
That's exactly the way I think about it.
And so that's what we're doing. And so whatever we can do, whether it's EMF shielding, or it's correcting the lighting environment, or from a real food is medicine perspective. And there's so many awesome products out there to help re-optimize our lives. That's all we're doing is our bodies are crying out for that ancestral space, that ancestral environment.
I always say, none of these supplements or technologies like yours or any of the other ones would have been necessary 16,000 years ago. You know what I mean? You'd be eating, organ meats, right? You'd be getting lots of natural light. You'd get hot. You'd get cold. You'd be drinking
You go to sleep
spring
after
water.
dark.
Yeah, like there's nothing really to do. Once it goes dark, your circadian rhythm would be regulated. I mean, not to say that people didn't get injured or ill, but I see the whole human condition of pathology is so simply reduced to the fact that we domesticated ourselves and we live indoors. Like pretty much anything that goes wrong with us can be traced at some point, if you go back far enough, to our disconnection from our natural hunter-gatherer life ways. But as you said, I mean, going back is impossible because that world doesn't exist anymore. Try going out and living in a federal park. They'll come kick you out. You know what I mean? There's it's pretty difficult to do that. And also, there's EMF everywhere. Like the world that we knew then is no longer here. So I think the fun strategy and the one that makes the most sense is like, how can we reintroduce some of the things that we've lost from nature? And so for me, that's, saunas, ice baths, red light, blocking blue light, dealing with the EMF, eating as close as I can to food that came out of the ground or was eaten by an animal that runs on the ground, and just like simplifying things. I think we love complexity. So when people want to start working on their health, we get so caught up in all of the available options when really like all they're doing is just kind of actually narrowing the path of simplicity back to what's been lost. So I love that perspective.
No, you're hitting the nail on the head. It's the ancestral wisdom and the health and such. The practices of our ancestors were very simple.
And movement too. I always forget about that because I'm not a big mover. I have to really push myself to move my body. But think about as a hunter-gatherer person. I mean, there are a few, intact, very few, unfortunately, hunter-gatherer peoples, and they're sitting around and chilling and resting and, carving spears and, opening nuts they gathered or whatever. But a lot of the time they're on the move, right? They're pursuing food, or they're moving their encampments. They're constantly moving around and interfacing with the environment and lifting some heavy stuff, hauling logs to the fire or whatever.
And they have no diseases of civilization. They're those who don't die of exposure or trauma, those who reach a robust age of 60, 70, 80 years old. They're out there in the fields, like bending over, picking up things. They have zero cardiovascular disease, zero cancer, zero arthritis. How can that be? Well,
they can do a perfect squat all day long.
Yeah.
I remember going to, I think it was like Thailand and Cambodia, and just observing these old dudes. They sit around in a squat and they sit there and smoke cigarettes, and just chill and play cards or whatever they're doing. And I'm watching them going, how are their hips not getting sore? He's been sitting there for 30 minutes, I'm sitting there like having coffee somewhere going like, wow. That's what a normal human moves like. If I tried to sit like that for 5 minutes, it'd be like, my hips, and I was probably 40 at the time or something,
Yeah.
So we've lost so much. But back to the light, because I really want to geek out on this, and then definitely like obviously like get into the different types of saunas that are available and things like that, because I'm a fan of your sauna for sure, but I like other ones too for different, kind of uses and scenarios. But I did want to cover it's kind of in the blue light realm, okay, that I think many of us think here in the studio, we've got these great big windows. And if you walked in here with a realtor checking it out, they'd be like, and the room has a lot of natural light. That's what we think of as natural light. But we can see from the spectrometer or just an understanding of glass that we're actually creating like a fake blue light if we're behind glass in our car, in an airplane, in an office, in our home, or wearing glasses. We're both wearing glasses right now, or contact lenses, and of course with sunscreen. Now, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I often get this wrong, by going behind glass or glasses, contacts, etc., we're eliminating, is it the UVB that gets cut out or the UVA? I always forget which one. Or do you even know?
Well, so the low E glass and the modern window glass that's low E, it's called energy efficient. It's blocking both. It has means of blocking ultraviolet light that causes your leather couch to fade over time, but ultraviolet light doesn't really substantially cause substantial thermal heat transfer effects. It's infrared that does that. And so they are blocking ultraviolet light, but they're also in terms of energy efficiency perspective, 100%, it's designed to block infrared, which includes what we're talking about, the healing component of infrared.
And then what about just a clear piece of glass in terms of UVA, B, and C? Like, isn't that glass, just take the low E thing and the infrared piece
Yeah.
away, but isn't that giving us this spiked, narrow, kind of toxic blue light like an LED or fluorescent light would?
No, not like what they call clear glass. Sometimes they call it greenhouse glass. So there's definitely a little bit of loss of transmiss, the transmissibility, I think it's called. So like not 100% of the light goes through, no matter what. Also with the thermal light bulb, what we use is it's a little bit less than 100% that comes through. But clear glass, greenhouse glass, is just that. Like plants, they need the full spectrum, right? And you can fake it a little bit. Like at the show, they have these little lettuce pod things where it's just a row of LED white and blue LEDs, but you can see there's like some reds mixed in with them, and so you can simulate it from artificial light perspective and kind of get there just like you can do with humans. And so with blue light is a sympathetic stressor, so it gets us all jacked up. The entertainment and the consumer industry understands this. That's why when you go to the casino, all the windows are blocked out and the LED lights are super bright. They've understood this for a long time. That's why the shift to blue light only was, which is essentially LED and fluorescent based, more energy efficient light sources, was not at all only because it's more energy efficient, uses a little less electricity. It was absolutely from a consumerist mindset designed to leverage the power of blue light to convince people to get excited and to buy things and to be interested in things and to catch people's interest. So
I've always thought about that because if you walk into, well, I made everyone, but if I walk into Target, Home Depot, like any of these, Best Buy, it's the lighting makes me feel crazy. Like I don't, because I'm susceptible to the flicker and that narrow spectrum of blue light, but I find it to be very agitating to the point where even I normally don't really wear blue blockers, like my gilded glasses during the day. But if I go in a store like that, if I have them, I'll wear them
mhm.
so I can just like calm down. But perhaps it's that agitated state that flicker and blue light puts you in that just keeps you kind of filling up your cart or something, right?
Really?
I don't know. I'm always thinking to the furthest realm of conspiracy, but you would think, I mean, if I owned a retail establishment, I would have your lights in there. I would want it to be super relaxing and chill and have people feel just at home and, create a vibe, which is what I try to do in my home, for example, when I have people over. But yeah, it seems like the lighting that we're exposed to in schools and hospitals, big box stores, wherever there's large buildings is very irritating light. And I've always wondered if there's some nefarious purpose behind
There
that.
kind of is, yeah. It gets you jacked up. It's a blue light. It's a sympathetic stressor, so it puts you into what's called fight or flight mode. The nervous system has the fight or flight, and then the rest and digest mode. And ancestral humans were 90% of the day in rest and digest, which should really be called rest and digest and heal. What's called parasympathetic nervous state. And nowadays, in the modern era, we're flipped on that. We're 90% of the
I
day
definitely am right
in
now.
fight or flight, Yeah.
Oh,
And so
man.
and unfortunately, in health, it seems like although it's very important to exercise, there's too much focus on just exercise as a means of achieving health and not enough on this idea of purification and recuperation and rest, which is not just sauna, although sauna I think is the best for purification. There's also sleep. Sleep is so important, and the two are really intertwined, and we're very dependent on light. We're beings of light. We're light eaters, right? I keep saying that we're so much less biochemical than we are bioelectric and electromagnetic at the quantum level. We literally absorb light at the cellular level. It causes all this healing stuff. We have voltage gates in the cells, like the voltage gated calcium ion channels that are very sensitive to man-made electric fields, like the microwave signals. We have all these different systems in the bodies that are electric, and it's totally to our detriment that we are exposed to this electromagnetism again. That's not that of nature, what's called native EMF. So people mix the two together and they think, oh, EMFs are all bad. Well, the sunlight is EMF. It's electromagnetism. The Schumann frequency of the Earth, like 7.83 hertz. That's a really low, long wavelength, but that's like right in the brain wavelength bands, the beta and the theta and all the brain waves. That's all like whatever 4 or 5 hertz to 20 or 30 hertz. These really long wavelengths those are the brain waves. So we're very subject to all of this.
God, that's crazy to think about that versus the EMF in the megahertz and gigahertz range.
There
Like,
wasn't much of the megahertz and the gigahertz
That's
range, and of course now with 5G and stuff,
yeah, that's
there's so
crazy.
much that wasn't before. But and some of the stuff we the more we learn about this, like, we can either use it for good, I think, or we can use it for evil. Like, there's this concept. I did a report on that actually when I was in college on brain entrainment, and they have that, like, the whole CIA mind control stuff of the conspiracy theories is really, really not so conspiratorial. It's, in fact, there's a lot of robust science behind it. You can stimulate a human brain with a brain wave, um, like in the 15 hertz range or 20 hertz range, and you can achieve what's called resonance, wherein when the two frequencies match each other, they resonate with each other, and then the destination frequency. So in the brain wave, once you change the stimulus wave, it will track it. So you can shoot basically brainwave frequencies at the brain, and then you can change the frequency, and the brain will follow. And this whole idea of, like, creating a voice in people's mind and all that, that's very well documented. You can do this, man, because we're subject to all this electricity, for
This
better
is
or
why
worse.
someone needs to invent a proper tinfoil hat. That's the purpose of tinfoil hats, is to stop that stuff. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And I could go on that shit forever. But I mean, actually, you can look at these military grade weapons that use millimeter waves,
Mm-hmm.
up in the gigahertz. I mean, they can use them for crowd control, right? Make everyone start burning and itching and going crazy and run in the other direction. I mean, it's not like totally.
And guess what the body scanners are at the airport? So that's
Yeah,
millimeter wave technology.
I do not walk through those.
And guess what the new 5G 27 to 30 gigahertz band is? That's millimeter wave technology. It's called millimeter wave because the actual wavelength is about a millimeter long.
Wow.
So now the body scanner technology that's at the airports is flying through the air. And we're not even far away, maybe 6G or 7G, we're going to have wireless power, wireless charging.
Right.
So, you won't even have a charging port anymore. You'll just walk down the street,
Oh my
and it'll be
God.
charging it. And of course, what is it doing to our biology at that
Bro,
point?
this is why I need to move to another planet with normal, smart people. I'm classifying myself as normal and smart. I wanted to ask you something though. Going back to the artificial indoor light, and then I want to play around with some of the lighting here. Hopefully, we can catch it on video. So I've got this light. What do you call this one right here? The
This is the
single light?
photon.
Okay, the
Yeah.
photon. So I've got a couple of these around. I have one in my sauna that's kind of down below the little stool.
You have the Sauna Supreme. So
Yeah,
that's
it's next
like
level.
the biohacker. It's
Yeah,
got a
and
little
it's
more heat, a little more light, a little more intense.
but I've been using this thing just in rooms in the daytime and nighttime to balance the light. So this one's yours that you brought because it's got the new cool little cage that's I think a bit more tricked out. But the one over there on my desk, I mean, the first thing I do when I walk in here is turn on that red light because if I have the overhead lighting in here, it flickers. It's gnarly blue light.
All blue only. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the studio light I have. Now that one is made for videos, so I don't think it flickers. We can test it, but it's a super gnarly blue spectrum. And I just feel better when I'm working in here and I have this red light next to me on my desk. It just feels like the light is more balanced. I'm like kind of hacking the lack of full spectrum light. And these are low E windows, so I'm not getting that red or near infrared
Mm-hmm.
light because that's, energy efficient and it's cutting. This is outside, but we're cutting it off with the glass. So aside from like the healing elements of the sauna and sweating and getting this light close to your skin, how can people use this as just like a light balancing tool in their home to mitigate blue light and flicker and things like that?
Right. So first of all, just in trying to mimic the sun spectrum and bring that full spectrum back into doors, like you said, all of our indoor lighting now is all blue only. There's none of this near infrared red, and we've already talked about not just how important it is, but how ubiquitous it is in our world, in being outdoors. So with the low E glass, we blocked all the infrared. There's zero infrared in here at all. There's particularly no photobiomodulation infrared, the near infrared. Photobiomodulation is defined as using red or near-infrared light to heal damaged or dying tissue or degenerate tissue, and also to optimize healthy tissue. And so what we're doing with this photon is we're just replacing that missing spectrum, that missing piece of the pie that you get from the sun. We're putting that back into your indoor environment. And just first of all, that is you're adding back in something that you're missing, that your body craves, right? And it's really important. But beyond that, it really has some intriguing, and we're going to show you right now, it really has an intriguing effect of canceling out the measurable blue light and canceling out also what you keep saying is flicker. So flicker is pulsing light, and pulsing light doesn't exist really in nature. Maybe, Brian Hoyer told me that once, like of shielded healing, if the only time the ancestral humans experienced flickering light was if they were running really fast, like in the jungle, and the starlight would be flickering, right?
Right, yeah.
But really, essentially, everything in nature is DC, it's direct current. So it's not a pulsed frequency where there's stoppages of the stimulus of the light. It's just constant light that doesn't flicker. But modern lighting, and even low wattage incandescent lighting actually flickers because of the source of the electricity that we use for most everything is alternating current. And alternating current, it's great for carrying electricity over long distances with very little resistance, very little loss, efficiency wise, but it's really quite terrible for our human biology. So alternating current in America is 60 hertz electricity. We use 120 volt is standard voltage, and it's at a 60 hertz frequency. So what that means is 120 times a second, the current changes direction, alternating current, right? And when it changes direction, there's a very brief period where the source of electricity stops, like in terms of powering devices. So with LED lights, they flicker much worse typically than fluorescent lights even, because a fluorescent light on alternating current will go from 100% power emission of wattage of light to like 30% or 40%. So it's like going like this. But the LED is going from 100% wattage emission to 0%, 120 times a second. So it's literally a strobe light, it's strobing you. And, you wouldn't do that you certainly wouldn't put a strobe light in front of a person who is autistic or, someone who was, had light sensitivities. But yet we do this. This is our primary source of light everywhere. It's increasingly more LED than it is fluorescent. Fluorescent's, interesting too. It's the original fluorescent bulbs were at like 120 and 200 frequency, the hertz, the ballast in there that produces the frequency. And they realized that people were getting a lot of headaches and stuff because the frequency was too low. And so the newer fluorescent ballasts run at like 400, 600, 800 hertz, 1,000 hertz anyway. So once the frequency was increased a lot, the noticeable flicker to the human being is reduced a little bit, and so it's less aggravating to you. But we are not using that. We're not using that knowledge and appreciating that with the production of LEDs. And LED is not incandescent light. LED is basically a computer chip that you run electricity through, and it begins to fluoresce. It emits light through fluorescence. And a typical LED, what you have, in most places, and what you have on screens, has a big blue light peak. Instead of it being this nice little curve of light, it has this huge blue spike, and then they add in other compounds, and they use different little computer chip technology tricks to make it fluoresce in the yellow or the red. So to the eyes, you can buy LEDs now that are tungsten colored, and it's the color temperature is more yellow. It's more tungsten, but it's hiding this very high concentration of blue light. But then on top of that, it's flickering. And flickering light is associated with migraines and headaches and, insomnia and depression, so many other things. We all hate, there's some part of us that's aggravated, maybe not hate, but we're aggravated by working in front of the computer all day.
Totally.
It just sucks.
I mean,
right?
that's the thing of walking into the big box stores. And people listening, I think I say this in one of our sponsors is Blue Blocks, and they make a really great red LED bulb that doesn't flicker. And so I always instruct people, if you're wondering if the light in your office or home or wherever flickers, is you can just take a slow motion video with your iPhone of the light and then watch it back and you'll see it on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. It's like a really easy way to test that. And I think about it in terms of how your pupil, that's the black part, right? Yeah.
Behind.
Yeah. How your pupil adjusts to the size of it, right, to let more or less light in. And I imagine that as your eyes are exposed to a flickering light, that your eye is trying to adjust in 60 hertz electricity home or building. It's trying to adjust 120 times a second to less or more light. And in fact, and I could be imagining this, but it's one of those memories you think you had, but I'm not 100%. But I think I saw a video at some point. There was a slow motion video of somebody's pupil going open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close under flickering light. In other words, the eye trying to adjust to the fluctuation, the imperceivable fluctuation of dark light, dark light.
It's there, even though, maybe consciously we're not quite aware of it. Plus, Luke, it's not just that our eyes are light receptors. We have blue light receptors in our brain, in our gut, and in our skin, actually everywhere. So we're very susceptible to the light around us, and definitely particularly the blue light, just as we also have light receptors for red and near infrared and at the mitochondrial level, really in every cell of the body. So we're really, it's really interesting how dependent we are on light. Near infrared light, through the mitochondrial stimulation and the production of ATP, cellular energy, it can actually satisfy our caloric requirement part during the day. So, you might find
the breatharians. This is what they figured out, the sun-gazing breatharians.
Right, the light eaters, right? They would sit
Yeah.
there and just sit under the sun. They wouldn't eat anything. They wouldn't drink very much water, and they'd be fine. They weren't starving. And so I find that personally in the summer, when it's really hot out, I'm outside a lot and under the sun. I'm not packing in big meals. I'm not as hungry as much. Whereas in the winter, I'm definitely pushing more towards lots of homemade tacos and lots of, arm roasts and meat and stuff. But in the summer, the sun is satisfying some of our cells need to feed. And so we don't need as much. And then even more than that, it does so many other things. The more we learn about it, it's so fascinating how quickly we shrivel when we don't get this light, but how quickly we can bounce back too. There's this idea of what's called mitochondrial melatonin. And this is really new for me, Luke. I didn't even understand this. I always thought melatonin, it's in the pineal gland, blue light production stimulates or blue light stimulus during the day promotes production of melatonin, and then after dark, the ending of the blue light stimulus leads to the release of melatonin from the pineal gland to the brain clock, and it changes our hormonal cycle and kind of gets us ready for sleep. Well, it turns out that it's like 94% of the body's melatonin is not in the pineal gland and not in the heart and lungs, and it's not anywhere else but in the mitochondria. And actually, there's a whole very much separate system of melatonin that's all sort of isolated and separated in the mitochondria. And if you take melatonin, this is what I understand anyway, if you take melatonin supplements, a lot of people do, it doesn't penetrate the mitochondria. It's not accessing the system. And in fact, the pineal gland, so the release of that melatonin that can go into the blood and get in the bloodstream, move around in the body, that's only really used at the cellular level if you don't have enough of this mitochondrial melatonin running around. So first of all, melatonin is the number one antioxidant agent in the body. Number one. It's there to heal and deal with dying tissue and like repair or reconstruct. It fights oxidants, it fights free radicals and all these things that cause us to age and cause disease in the cells. Number one actor.
Number one anti-cancer nutrient in the body too.
Yeah. And so guess what? Guess what stimulates the production of mitochondrial melatonin, which is 94% of the body's melatonin.
Let me guess. Near infrared
light. It's unbelievable,
so cool.
Dude. It's so trippy.
Did you see the study, speaking of the body as a giant solar panel, essentially, or, these photoreceptors we have in our skin? There was a study when I first started geeking out on blue light, wherein they were trying to see if it was also the case, as is when you get, blue light in your eyes at night, it shuts down melatonin production for a number of hours, whatever it is, 2, 3, 4 hours afterward. So they covered someone's eyes with, I'm assuming blue blockers or something, and then just shined blue light on the back of their knees. And it also shut down the melatonin production, just like it did getting it in your eyes. Like even getting bright white or blue light on your skin also shunts melatonin production.
Right.
Did you see that? Is it?
I've heard of that. Yeah, but it's so interesting.
There is in fact, this one I'm not imagining because I remember reading the
Mhm.
study. I mean, they conducted the study in a lab and it's a thing, So of course, then afterward, I got all paranoid because I would have blue blockers on, and then I'm like, oh man, I walk in the kitchen without my shirt on, and there's that fucking LED light, So then I got all paranoid.
It'll be a new product line for Gilded. We blue light.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think with all of this, it's nuanced, and like if you get it's like, I don't know, it's a balance, right? Psychologically, if one gets too paranoid and caught up in this, you're putting yourself in a sympathetic nervous system, cortisol, adrenalized stress state, worrying about all this shit, right? Which is probably worse for you than just being under the blue light and being relaxed and just handling it, right? So I'm always trying to find, the balance, and my goal with talking to people like you is sharing information with people so at least you're armed with some fundamental facts in terms of, our biology and how we respond to our environment or not, but then also finding solutions that are practical and not too crazy and inconvenient, and knowing when there's just some things that are just outside of our control and you just kind of have to live your life and enjoy it. And there's not necessarily a question or an answer in there, but just as a blanket statement, mostly speaking to myself, because I tend to get really neurotic about this shit and try to be perfect about everything. But I think there are some tools, like what I mentioned, having this light in my office. And then also I took the one from our house, and so now I don't have that. But I was also using this in our temporary kitchen because I can't change the light bulbs in the fixture. It's just there. Yeah. So if I go in there at night and I need a lot of light, it's going to be blue light. So I flip this on, to just balance the light. And for me, I just become habituated, where I become less paranoid and uptight about it. It's just like, oh yeah, if I'm going to walk in that room, I'm going to hit this certain light switch, or I have a pair of my blue blockers there and I throw them on, and I just kind of build it into my day-to-day life so I don't have to spend so much time and energy worrying about it, which is probably also not good for you.
I love that. We get into the weeds of these things, and we become like hypochondriacs about everything.
Yes.
And yet, I feel like what you're saying is really important, and that would be the message that I would also promote is one of hope. You can talk forever about all the problems of society and all the problems of modern health and our toxic exposure to all these things, and how we're really in a bad way, and we have so much stress in our lives, and there's 6G and 8G and 10G and all that, and yet the solutions are really simple. And what I love about these things, particularly what I do, but sort of the biohacking stuff in general, is that the solutions are incredibly simple. And particularly like sauna and light. What I love about sauna in general, also with my sauna, is that you just sit there in your lazy butt and you don't do anything. And yet there's so many different things going on, with the SaunaSpace sauna and the Faraday sauna, like what you have. You have the light therapy and the photobiomodulation, the melatonin, the mitochondrial stuff. You have the purification of the body. Sauna reduces your risk of dying of all things the more you use it. So that's pretty amazing for so many things. But you're also doing grounding therapy in there. The sensory deprivation that you have, the break from all the fight or flight stimulus you're overwhelmed with.
What's funny about your Faraday sauna, and I don't want you to explain that for people that don't know what it is, but because I don't get cell service in there, it makes me not like listen to podcasts and stuff. So I go in there. I mean, sometimes I got to admit, I'll have one pre-downloaded and I'll go in and listen to it, but it's encouraging me more to go in there and just have a moment of solitude and get rid of the electrostatic noise of all the EMF in the environment, and actually just be with myself and just do some breath work and just calm down. So I actually like that feature, that it makes it's easier to divorce yourself from your phone for those of us that are quite addicted to our phones, because you go in there and it doesn't work. You're like, no signal, because you're in a Faraday cage. So it kind of knocks out two birds with one stone.
It's just that more than anything else, if you're already in there and you're already doing the sweating and this healing, you're doing all this stuff, we also forget to take some time to ourselves. Ancestral humans were alone. They had long periods of solitude where they weren't talking to anybody and nothing was going on. They weren't stimulated by anything. And that's so rare nowadays. Those of us who live in the West, we have families, we have children. I run all day long at work. When I get home, I got my 2 boys and my wife, and we're hanging out, and I'm always stimulated by something. I'm always talking about something, I'm always trying to multitask. And so to be in there, like Faraday especially, and to be by yourself, it's such a rarity. It's such a luxury. And for many people, initially, it's really quite shocking. And they're like, well, I got to download something, right? I got to listen to a podcast or something, or I got to bring my book in there or something. And I'm also like that. I love reading.
Yeah, and it's also like it's the high performance sort of attitude too. It's like I've been meditating for a long time. I love quiet. I love being by myself, but I battle more so, I think, with just like, well, I could be getting something done. It's like this addiction to productivity. It's like, even preparing for my interview with you, I was in the sauna last night. I was listening to a pre-downloaded interview that you'd done with someone else to just brush up on your body of knowledge and stuff. I'm like, I need this time right now. I'm going to use it to do something productive, which will help, facilitate a successful interview tomorrow. I think some of us just have a hard time unplugging and knowing that life will go on, the things will get done. You can get away for 20 or 30 minutes from doing something and probably even make yourself more productive when you do go to re-engage, right? Because you've lowered just the static in your field to the point where you can, once you rejoin activity, be more focused and more deliberate about what it is you're spending your energy on, instead of just kind of diffusing your energy all the time and always being activated or engaged in something. To take that time and kind of consolidate your attention so you can you can use it when you really need it.
And I never understood that in the beginning. I was always like, oh, get in there and get that therapy done, and then I'm going to be improved and doing better, improving my health, and I'll be better and all these other things. What I didn't understand in the beginning, and eventually led to the EMF shielding, and I started to incorporate in the design, and eventually the Faraday, was that you're actually when you're in there with nothing, no phone or anything, no book, you are actually multitasking. But from a biological perspective, you're doing all of this healing, and again, we get back to the biochemical and the physiological. Oh, I'm getting the mercury out, and I'm fixing this melatonin system and all that. And really, it's we're beings of energy. We're on an energetic level, and if you can appreciate that and just give yourself a little bit of time for that, you'll find that you're getting more value minute per minute out of that session than you could possibly get doing anything else that you could possibly incorporate in there. And then when you get out, your brain works better, your mind works better, and I feel like energetically and karmically, you're more powerful the more you fully commit to that really short period of 20 minutes of just being by yourself. And it's not a selfish thing. It makes you, for me particularly mentally, it makes me so much more just relaxed and able to deal with the crazy crap that comes my way all the time as soon as I get out. And so that's just it's an interesting thing where we've been trained in our lives, we don't have any moments of solitude, and yet when they're in there, it's like quite shocking. Like, where's my podcast, where's my book? But then you get in there and you're like, totally. It's really quiet to the senses in here, and it feels really good.
Especially with the EMF shielding. I think most people on the planet, unless you live very remote, don't ever experience, even for 20 minutes, not being bombarded with non-native EMF. I mean, there's very few places you can go where you're not getting hammered all the time, in a sub-perceptual way.
And that's only a thing of the last 2 generations.
I know.
That's all. That's a very new thing where you can't find, even when, we were like really young and kids, you could go out and there was no cell phone signal, camping. And I'm, you know,
Dude, I didn't get my first cell phone till I was like 27 or something, you know. I remember seeing them in the movies, those big giant phones that those rich guys had, you know, but yeah, it was not a thing at all. Of course, you had like radio waves and TV stations and military radar and aviation radar by the airport and stuff, but you weren't getting inundated like you are now. And the thing about it that's even crazier, I think, that we don't quite realize yet is the unknown harmonics that are being created in our atmosphere. So it's not just like you're getting, 2400 megahertz from Verizon on that cell tower. It's like you're getting this wide band of non-native frequencies. But what happens on a physics level, and I have no idea, but it can't be good when those all intersect and are now creating harmonics, right? It's like if you hit every key on the piano at once, doesn't sound very good. It's discordant, right?
hmm
So that's, again, not to be paranoid and make everyone worried, because like we can't control it. It's out of our control, but getting a brief period of refuge from that is incredibly healing. And so I'm going to tell myself, Luke, next time you get in the sauna space, don't
don't
do
bring
shit.
anything.
Just
Yeah.
chill. Do a little breathing. I love doing breath work in your sauna.
Yeah,
It's great.
that's something that I highly recommend, especially folks who are like, meditation. How in the hell do I do that? Like, what is that? It starts out with just simple breath work, and there's so many great ways and really wise people, you can follow to figure out how to do that. But just simple breath work is, breathing through the nose, activating the nitric oxide, and just like doing that. I did actually a breath work exercise on our Instagram live recently, and with a breath work specialist, and it's so cool how it takes like 5 or 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden you enter this sort of deeper reality, and you get more centered. You get into your body, and so yeah, I would highly recommend that to anybody. And that's, again, back to the message of hope. We're not stuck with all this. We don't have to be paranoid and negative and like, oh, this world's gone to hell. If we take care of our bodies, if we take that break from the EMFs, and we sweat and we purify and we redose up with near infrared light and trigger all these healing things, and then we recognize that, hey, not too much blue light after dark, food is medicine, real food, and a few other simple, intermittent fasting. I'm also a huge fan of, by the way. These things um, make us strong and make us resilient. The human body has incredible constitution. It can go so much. It can take so much. So if we just take these time to recharge using these ancestral wisdom practices, I feel like there's no problem going out in this high EMF world with the toxicity, and you're out at the restaurant and you're drinking the tap water, and the food's what it doesn't matter, because I have a physical and mental and spiritual and energetic practice that sustains me and regenerates me, pretty much every day. And so we can thrive in this modern world. We don't have to escape it, but we need to understand these things. You can't avoid this biological imperative that we all have.
Amen, brother. I want to remind people the show notes for this episode can be found at lukestorey.com/SaunaSpace. And also, for those of you interested in checking out Brian's technology, you can do that at sauna.space. I like your URL, by the way, using,
Thanks, brother.
sauna.space, and you can get 5% off too with the code Luke5. So sauna.space, the code's Luke5, and 5% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about like outfitting yourself with a sauna, that's meaningful. So thank you for that discount. I would be remiss if we didn't play around with a little of the technology. So those of you listening, this might not be as interesting as those watching. You can find this video on YouTube, but Brian's got what we call the C camera over here. And so, hey, C camera editors, we're going to see if we can get some of this light spectrum and flicker testing actually on camera. So I think as you do it, if you just kind of hold up what you're finding to your camera over here, we should probably be able to make some sense of it. So
yeah. So what I have here is called the HOPO or the HOPO. It's a spectrometer and a flickering light meter, and it measures light from 380 to about 1100 nanometers or so. So that's visible light, and this near infrared light that we keep talking about. The two most, the most relevant spectrums, more or less, that we have. And so it's really cool because we can compare and contrast different sources of light and like what do they do, and then we can match them to the sun to see, well, is this harmonizing with our biology, or is it discordant? And also the photon, this, how we're adding in that near infrared spectrum back in. So I'll try to do it the best I can.
So let me turn your light off.
Okay.
Okay. And then I want to turn on the nasty flickering overhead LEDs above us so that we can see what that looks like on a flicker level and the spectrum of light.
Perfect. Yeah. Turn those on.
Okay.
And I can snapshot this and then pause it so we can show it to the screen.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to.
All right. So we just turned on the, like office building overhead lighting that I never turn on. Although it is nice, I got to say, to have some brighter light in here.
It is. So I just snapshotted it there. And so you
Okay.
see there's a big spike of blue light. And I can show everybody this over here. So you see the big blue spike of blue, and then there's visible light. And then look at the valley. There's absolutely no near infrared at all. The infrared there is none from this fluorescent light. And there a bit of this measurement is contaminated by some of the natural light from the sun that's coming in.
So if it was nighttime and we just had that light on, you would get a more true
You'd
reading.
get the spectrum would be more spiky. You wouldn't have this fill in of the visible light. But in all cases, you have low E glass because there's no infrared light at all coming in. And of course, we have our SaunaSpace light off. So the other thing that you see here, Luke, is we see what's called flicker frequency and fluctuation depth. So I'm gonna flick over to this and try to show it to you guys. Again, it's maybe not ideal, but so you see there this sort of like waveform. So that's showing you the depth of the flicker, the degree of the flicker. So first of all, what we read on this is 120 hertz. This is what we were talking about before, right? Twice the electrical signal frequency. So we see, we're flickering 120 times a second, and the fluctuation depth of the flicker is 20%. So that's rather large. It's a more severe flicker than maybe like a 5% or 10% flicker. So that's pretty bad. We don't want that. The sun, of course, won't read any flicker frequency at all. And it also, the fluctuation depth will just basically be flatlined. So that is, I think this is, you know what? I'm not sure if this is fluorescent. I think this might be tubular LED.
Oh, okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah, probably.
I think so, because fluorescent light, and you can see that on my website or on some of my blog articles, blog.sauna.space. Fluorescent light is really weird and spiky, not necessarily only in blue, but also in green and yellow. It's very weird and shocking looking. The classic LED light is what we just showed you. So again, that's, you have that big blue spike, and then you've got some filler here of visible light, but none of the healing therapeutic infrared. So I think these are definitely LED actually.
Okay, yeah.
So we can also show the phone screen and the TV screen. Well, I don't know what you want.
Yeah.
To show
Let's
next.
let's see what happens to our light spectrum when we put on your photon light in here. So let's just say like I'm stuck with these overhead lights and I need the actual light just for visibility. How is this going to improve the temperature and or flicker at all?
So we're hanging out next to imagine that this is Luke right here, the little light sensor, and we're kind of hanging around next to it. So you see when you bring the photon in, all of a sudden, yes, there's still some blue light, but that huge spike is a lot shorter now.
Yeah.
And also we filled in the infrared. So we've added back in that spectrum, but we've also reduced the measurable amount of the blue light from above. So that's like the corrective effect where we're not just filling in the piece of pie what we're missing, we're ameliorating and minimizing the damaging effect of the blue light itself. And so it's not just your overhead lighting, it's also your every digital screen they're all LED, right? All of them. The phones, your iMacs, your televisions. For example,
the TV in our temporary spot flickers like crazy. I did the slow-mo iPhone video of it. I'm like, oh my God. But you think about like sitting and watching a 2-hour movie and you're not only, it's like the flickers in the room, you're actually staring at the flickering light. It's like staring at a strobe light.
Yeah, I think
Subreceptor
projector
way.
screens are so much better for that reason.
Ah,
You
good
don't have
idea.
that direct blue dagger stabbing you. You know?
Right. That's
But
a good
another
idea.
thing I do is also when I watch TV, I put this on. It's kind of strange the first time you do it. Like, why would you want that much ambient light when you're trying to black it out? But you'll find if, sitting down movies are long, watching a 2-hour movie, it's really nice to, again, for the same effect, have that next to you. So
Does having this incandescent bulb of yours present while there's flicker do anything to minimize the flicker? And does it like kind of overpower the flicker? Or is that flicker up there still just as prevalent with this here?
no, it does. It has the same minimizing effect. Certainly it's not 100% eliminating it. You are still subject to this light above you, but it's kind of hard to show here on the screen, but it typically reduces the degree of flicker by like between 40 and 80%, like a lot,
Oh, wow.
like a lot. So anything you could do again to minimize it is really super important because we're not programmed to get blue only light. There's these research where you shine blue light on like worms and they crawl to the ends of the earth to escape the blue light, and we're just like them. So we've removed all the good infrared from our indoor synthetic environment. We've added in a ton of this blue, and it comes with this pulsing, flickering effect that is just terrible for us. And it's ubiquitous. It's who doesn't, especially in this post-COVID era, who doesn't have to work at the computer anymore? I mean, it's almost everybody and everything. And increasingly, as we continue to evolve, I think it's just part and parcel of work and of life in general. Screens everywhere.
For screen solutions, one thing I've done for the blue light is got this program called Iris, which is like a couple dollars a month or something. You've heard of Iris, I'm assuming?
No, but I think it's like Flux.
It's a little more badass.
It's a little more badass.
Iris
Okay, cool.
has much more adjustability.
Okay.
Like you can turn your screen red to where you can barely tell what's going on, and you can adjust the level of blue and also the level of brightness manually, or you can set it to day night. And the inventor, I think he's like Hungarian or something. He claims that you can turn down the brightness using Iris and it doesn't increase the flicker. Because if I'm not mistaken, if you just take a standard, say, Apple computer and you want to turn down the brightness on your screen, you're essentially using a dimmer switch on the LED that's illuminating your screen. You're going to get more flicker off your screen if you dim your screen than having it fully illuminated. Do you know?
No, I agree with that. Although there are some newer technologies that help minimize the degree of flicker from LEDs. Like you can buy computer screens that are low eye fatigue, so-called low eye fatigue certified or low eye strain certified, and they're essentially using direct current drivers to try to provide more of a stable delivery of the electricity to the LED, so it's not pulsing, even though it's alternating current. So I've actually tested a lot of screens, and my iMac is one of the better ones that I've tested.
Oh, good. That's what I use.
No, it is. It actually is pretty good. And so, depending on the technology, yes, there's. I think when you reduce the visible light, there's a little bit of, maybe flicker issue that gets more severe, but all of those programs really help a lot with the blue light. And I think I think I can show that pretty well with my phone. So
okay.
That's cool. I've never heard of Iris, so I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
But certainly the market, the mainstream market has understood finally this. And like with iPhones, you have the night shift mode. That for me, I turn that all day long. And on my computer screens, I actually use that and another, filtering program my screen looks really brown, basically. But I can show you right now with a meter how effective that is. With and without night shift, and even without night shift in light mode versus dark mode, and sort of the brightness.
Did you set your iPhone where you can triple click and turn the whole thing
dark red? Yes, that's my top secret. Well, it's no longer very secret, but you can turn your red color filter on, and you just see the blue spike, drop even more. So I'd like to
All
actually
right.
show that
Should
real
I
quick.
turn off this flickering LED?
Yeah,
up
turn
here?
that off
Okay.
so we can get a
Okay.
more pure measurement here of kind of what's going on the
Okay.
screen. So first of all, I have night mode off, and I have true tone off,
Okay.
and I have dark mode off.
And for those listening, these are just settings on the main menu of your iPhone.
Yeah, in your iPhone, if you go to the sort of the light menu, the brightness controller,
Yeah.
you could turn off these color filters and these true shifts. And then, of course, I also have the triple tap red thing that I have that, we'll kind of keep that off here for a second.
Okay.
So this is the way the average iPhone user uses their phone. Full brightness all day long and none of these special modes. And then also I'm on a screen here that is, a bright screen. I'm not on a website that's dark mode, which actually we just came out with dark mode on my website because
Oh, no way.
and it really is.
That's
it's
cool.
It's way less toxic. And now I force dark mode basically on everything. It's just really nice for your eyes. But anyway, so you can see that, so we have a very tall blue spike. It's like at the top of the graph here, basically. And that's on full blue everything from the phone. So now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on night shift, which is the Apple software's built-in color filter. And what that's doing is it's supposedly making it nicer on the eyes. It's called night shift because you're supposed to use it after dark. So let's see what it does to the perspective, to the spectrum. Oh yeah. So you can see as soon as I turn night shift mode on, look how short the blue light peak is. It's a third of the height, and in fact, relative to the red-orange light, it's much shorter. The red-orange light now, that peak is the tallest peak. So we've already, and this is, you got to think about this as like the area under the curve, the percentage of the emission of the light. So now the blue light before was probably 50% or more of the light emitted from the screen of the iPhone. And now it's probably, I don't know, 25% or something. So we've reduced it in half or more, probably even more than that.
That's crazy to think that probably billions of people are laying in bed at night, like with their phone on full blue, full brightness, like right in front of their face, and then going, why do I have insomnia? It's
right.
crazy.
Why is my eyesight worsening? There's a cool study out there that just came out. It's the second one of its kind. Another one came out 2 years ago, wherein if you get near infrared light in the eyes before noon and you're over 40 years old, it prevents worsening of the eyesight. And they had just another study recently. So that's how the near infrared light amongst all these other tissues of the body is helpful for the eyes. But the flip side of that is blue light. Blue light causes little holes in your retina over time. So if you look at the retina of someone who's constantly working with LED and blue light all day long, they have like thousands of tiny little pinprick holes in their retina, and all of that leads to, there's various manifestations of that. It could be floaters, it could be macular degeneration, so many other things. But this worsening of the eyesight that folks who were born with perfect eyesight and eventually need reading glasses is now starting to occur when folks are like 25, 30 years old instead of when they're 50 years old.
Wow.
And it's blue light is actually from LEDs is so toxic to our eyes. Forget about the rest of the stuff we're talking about. Just for damage to the eyes themselves, the French Occupational Safety Institution, it's called ANSES. It's like the OSHA of the United States. They, in 2015, put out a memorandum saying, do not use LED lighting for home and office environments. It should only be used for industrial lighting purposes because it's so damaging to our eyes, just like all day long. And that's what it does. It's very damaging. So being like this after dark, it's not just messing with your sleep cycle and stuff. It's blinding you, slowly but surely. And it's a very cumulative thing. And then combine that with the fact that you're not doing any healing, you're not adding infrared maybe back into your life, and it can it can cause damage pretty quickly to your eyes. And so again, from a consumer perspective, these companies are like, well, we want people to use our devices even longer. So, okay, maybe we'll dial down the blue a little bit. and so you have like night shift built in, but
15 years later.
Yeah. But even that's not enough. So I'm gonna show you one more time, but what I'm gonna do is, and you can turn this on in your settings. I think it's like, let me tell you, it's in the settings, and the Android phones have a similar thing that you can do too.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I've
you can
seen
look it
that.
up, but in the settings, it's under accessibility, and it's called, and then if you go to display and text size, it's called a color filter, and you can come in here and you can hotkey it with my side button that I have. But if you just come to the settings, you can click color filters, and you can pick color tint and make it, if you want to make it really red, you can, and then you can make it really, really intense. So that is probably a little bit too intense unless it's, I was in bed per se.
Yeah.
But even if I turn it to this, and by the way, if I'm not outside in the sun, I have it with my red color filter on all day long indoors.
Yeah.
It's set, so it's just enough that I can comfortably read it, but I'm dialing that down. It's only really outside do I ever turn that off, because in the bright sun, you really need that to even read the screen.
Yeah.
So now I have it on, a red color filter, and I'm going to go back to the same screen I was on. I was in Google Maps here, and we're going to do one more test and see what this spectrum looks like. So now if you look at the spectrum, you can see the blue light is basically gone. It's basically flatlined. There's a little bit of a hump there, but look at the emission of the light. It's pretty much all orange red. And that's why, and that's the way it appears to the eye. It's very orangey red with some brown in it. And that's, we've basically reduced the blue light exposure to a very, very minimum. And like I showed you before, if you take this now and we continuously measure it, even with that little amount of blue light, or maybe we'll see something more dramatic here if we turn off our color filter a little bit, add a little blue light in, and then I'm in front of the blue light. But if I add in the photon, now look at the spectrum. So you see, not only have I removed the blue and I've really flatlined it, I've added in so much infrared that if we measure the area under the curve and measure the percentage of blue light, it's like all gone.
That's so cool.
Completely. And all we did was we brought in this huge, it's this, it's a specially designed light bulb and all that, but it's this big, huge 250 watt incandescent bulb that adds in this, this amazing spectrum that we're all craving. We don't, and people don't understand why. They just they'll when I go to a show, they'll sit in the sauna, and the shows are really toxic. Lots of EMF, lots of fluorescent LED light, lots of stress, everybody's on their phones. And people will go inside the sauna, and we always have the Faraday sauna. So they'll go inside the Faraday sauna. I'm like, don't take your phone in there. I'm like, and your Apple Watch, and your Oura Ring, and your this. And people are like stripping down all this gear that they have right on them. And they get inside, and they'll typically sit in for, between 1 and 4 or 5 minutes just to try it out. They're at the show. And the most common reaction when they get out is they get out and they're like smiling and they're glowing. They feel great. And it's indescribable for them. They're getting out. They're like, I feel good. I don't know why. And it feels so toxic out here. And it's like, it's hard for people to appreciate. How can this light do all these things? How can photobiomodulation across 8,000, peer-reviewed studies do all this healing, do all this, this amazing stuff to our bodies? Because it's just light, bro. It's just light. And yet you'll find that it does work. It just takes a little bit of time. So you use it and you're like, well, I feel good. And then you'll use it the next day and you're like, all right, that feel good. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I don't have my gut feels good. And, I had bowel movement and I have more energy and stuff. So it's both really powerful and subtle, this effect of having natural light in our lives. And so this stuff, you also, if you put that flicker or if you put that filter on the Iris or whatever program you're using, the first time you use it, you're like, it's really brown, And then if you use that for 3 or 4 days, you get habituated to it, and you cannot work without it. And,
Totally.
And for me, with this, I cannot work for any long periods of time without this. Just like I have AirPods, AirPods Max or whatever, and I use them once in a while, but I use them infrequently, only, for convenience. And I just can't do a phone call more than like 10 or 15 minutes with it. It's really aggravating to me. So I finally found these plug-in headphones, which are not easy to find anymore, actually. And anytime I'm doing any routine calls though at work, it's always just through the computer, the smartphone and the
Yeah.
computer. And I just I cannot do phone calls like this anymore now that, no, for long periods of time, now that I've got used to more of a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, you do habituate yourself. Like every once in a while, I'll accidentally at night take the red filter off my phone, clicking around. I'm like, it's so strong. And even the iris on my computer, I mean, I just have it on there all the time. Sometimes I take it off in here because if it's like bright sun coming through in the studio,
Yeah.
because I can't see it when it's red. But yeah, you do get so used to it that then something cool happens, and then when you go back to the standard or kind of the default settings of bright blue, tons of flicker, it's super annoying. But you don't know that it is until you live the
Yeah.
other way for a ways. I wanted to ask you one last thing about this, and then I know we've been here a while. I appreciate your generosity of time. This is like
Absolutely.
the shit I geek out on, obviously, so I could do it all day. Hopefully, the listeners feel the same way. For those, again, just listening and all the stuff we just did, you're like, wait, what was that? You can find a link to the video at lukestorey.com/saunaspace. One thing I wanted to ask you about this, and I don't know if this has any legitimacy or if I just like it, but if I have any sore spots on my body, I'll take this single bulb because it's always on my desk, and I'll just like hold it on my back or my hip, or I'll like set it down next to my chair and expose my lower back to it. And I feel like it helps with like spot treating pain. And then also, if I ever feel like I'm getting a sore throat or feeling a little funky, I'll actually just hold it up or lean up against it quite close on kind of my, um, you know, what is it, thymus and
Thyroid.
yeah, thyroid and this kind of whole like upper chest and throat area. And I find it to be extremely useful for that. Am I imagining that, or is there anything to that?
No, yeah, absolutely not.
Like elbow pain and just weird stuff. It's like a
No,
painkiller
we've kind of
basically.
geeked out on this. You can use this photon for indoor environmental light therapy. So you're making the indoor synthetic light more naturalistic, canceling out blue light and flicker light. So we call that using the photon to beat screen fatigue. So that's one use of it. Also for blue light free, flicker light free light after dark, this is really optimal nocturnal lighting. It's literally a mobile fireplace. It's a mobile campfire. And so those are like ways to correct your lighting environment indoors. And you can also put in your sauna like you have to really amp it up to make it super, super awesome. But that's not the classic use of it. The classic use of the photon is what we referred to in the beginning as single lamp therapy. And that's been used for like 120 years, just as the SaunaSpace sauna is the full body therapy. This is the targeted spot therapy. So um, whatever problem you have in a targeted area of the body, all you do is you emphasize that area with this light 18 to 24 inches away or so on the naked tissue. And there's a lot of things that happen. Of course, I'm not a healthcare provider and I can't make any medical claims, but if we look at not just our customer reports, but we look at the science, you get immediate inflammation reduction as a result of stimulating the mitochondria with this near infrared light. So that obviously reduces pain, immediately. If you have joint pain, gut pain, if you're got a hangover, and so forth. But if you feel bad, if you're sick, if you feel down, yeah, you can use it on the head. We limit our exposure to 10 minutes per hour on the head or the throat. But other parts of the body, you can do 20, 30, 40 minutes or more of a single session. And you can repeat those sessions on the head or on the other parts of the body up to 10 times a day. So for me, I all day long, I have this next to my computer for beating screen fatigue. It's not targeted therapy. It's just kind of in the environment, kind of pointing up. It's not directly targeted at me. But if I wake up, first of all, when I travel, it's, very high EMF everywhere. It's really, it's stressy. So in the morning, I use that in the morning to kind of wake up. I put it in my face for 10 minutes. Before bed, you can put it on the back of the head to promote parasympathetic relaxation and lymphatic drainage to kind of promote the sleep state for the body. For those who have neuropsychiatric issues, totally using it on the gut and using it on the head, the gut-brain connection. A lot of us have so much leaky gut and inflammation in the gut that it is very directly affecting our neuropsychiatric state. Also, people in the winter, they get this thing called that the doctors call SADS, seasonal affective disorder,
Oh, right.
which
Usually
is
think about using like blue light or full spectrum light for that, but
right.
that's a
So, but
that's
back to what we
interesting.
talked about in the beginning. So they're concerned with vitamin D, and so the conventional medical recommendation is a flickering LED blue light lamp that's like 10, that's so many foot candles. It's a ton of light. Where in fact, uh, the red near infrared is just as helpful, probably more so, and that's my opinion. But if you look at the photobiomodulation, the other research, there's a ton of beneficial neuropsychiatric effects to the brain, to the mood, to our conscious, our attitude, our outlook by using near infrared light. They're using it for neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and things like that. We also have our customers, we have customer reports having incredible results with that, but also um, that whole serotonin dopamine release thing, like and the flip side of that again with the blue light and the EMFs is all that stuff makes us psycho. It makes us depressed and
Yeah.
anxious and psycho. So in our customers, for what it's worth, and a lot of people out there are now using this to just enhance mood, which again, don't get into the weeds. Go back to the basics. Wouldn't you love sitting by the campfire, and doesn't that make you feel good? Like that vibe. It's that light, it's that experience that it works. We all crave it. We all need it. And so um, fundamentally, the single lamp therapy, it is the most widespread use of it, although it's becoming increasingly popular to use it for screen fatigue. That just, I've got a problem in my knee, I've got a problem down here, I've got diabetic, I've got edema in my foot, or I've got a wound that doesn't heal. Near infrared light therapy, photobiomodulation, that is used. That's one of the most well understood uses is inflammation reduction and wound healing. That's been used for a long time for that. So we have the biological, physiological wounds, and we have the mental, spiritual wounds and traumas, and you can work through and sauna as well. I mean, great for that. But those of you who are skeptical of this concept, and you're like, what, light, this and that and the other, this is it's not just more, lower cost and easier to use. It's so passive. You don't have to get in the sauna and spend 20 minutes, shower afterward. That's more of a time and space commitment, as it were, even though well worth it. This is so many people buy this now and they just have it next to them, and people call it their goofy light, or their happy light or whatever, and people don't understand, and then they're like, dude, I love that thing and I have to have that. I have it all the time, and it gives people more of appreciation and respect for this idea that we're beings of light and we're subject to light, and it's so powerful in its healing effects. And yeah, absolutely, people, we have a lot of athletes that use it for injury recovery, reducing dramatically your recovery time from like a quad tear or whatever things are. They're using it for recovery after surgery. They're using it for recovery after radiation therapy, actually, and like breast radiation therapy and chemotherapy and so forth, to basically repurify and re-cleanse and rebuild after all these super invasive, like toxic therapies the conventional medicine offers, that maybe prudent or appropriate for certain circumstances, but they always come back to light and heat to normalize things and fix things, and
Yeah.
deal with all
Yeah.
these side effects. Like, and anyone can use this stuff, by the way. So that's an important point to make. There is not really any contraindication for any of this, other than small children need to be supervised, of course, and pregnant women. Usually, we try to avoid any sort of excessive heating of the fetus, because we don't want to promote any inflammation to the developing nervous system of the fetus. But beyond that, any age group, any a male, female, any sort of body condition that you have, whatever you're dealing with, you can use this stuff, and you can use it a lot, and it's very safe. And that's what I love about biohacking and natural wellness in general, and also what I love, about you and your podcast and all the stuff that you talk about. Is this natural stuff is, from a cost benefit analysis, it's so much higher. It's high value, low risk, or it's high benefit, low risk, and that equates to a better value. So instead of all this alternative medicine, this goofy light stuff being a last recourse after all conventional medical approaches are exhausted, this should be the first recourse. It's not only, more effective, I would argue, and lower risk, it's also really more affordable in an age where one of the number one causes of bankruptcy is due to medical expenses of people, and they get really sick, and so that's sort of the paradigm that we're trying to shift. Hey, you use all this consumer logic when you go buy a car, when you buy a case for your iPhone, you read all the reviews on Amazon, and you compare, you ask your friends, you ask your mom, you do all this analysis, and it seems really odd that we don't do that with our healthcare products and services. We suspend that logic, we put it aside, we rely on the external expertise of these modern priests and white frocks that we call physicians and doctors and all that stuff. And we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't want to talk too much trash on them because for trauma care, they're lovely. Like every time if I cut my finger off, I'm going to go to the hospital and get it sewn back up. And that's really awesome.
Yeah, you're not going to put some B vitamins on it. Hope for the best.
But for the diseases of civilization, for care of diseases, I would consider the conventional approaches to be very, very much failures for the most part. And unfortunately, that's so that's the paradigm we got to shift. Just when you look at things and you're buying stuff out there for your health, compare and contrast. What is the benefit? What are the side effects? What are the risks? And, what's right for me? And just apply that same rigorous analysis that you do to buying other stuff. And I think people, be a lot better off and appreciate more how amazing natural health is, even though, you look it up on Wikipedia and it's like, it's quackery and kookery and all that, but that's not true. Like if you just listen out there, listen to amazing podcasts like what you're doing, all this incredible education that's out there. There's incredible studies out there with light therapy, with sauna, with real food as medicine, thousands and thousands of studies on humans, and this stuff works. It's just mainstream media is not going to tell you that. And your doctor may not even be aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at who's funding whom, too. That's the thing. I get pissed at the mainstream media, and then I realize, well, who's putting them on TV? You know what I mean? They have a vested interest in, disempowering people. It's a bottom line kind of thing. I want to touch on the sauna, and first thing I want to say is that dog over there, Cookie, she's on the higher dose infrared mat now. That's one of her favorite tools. But if I go in your sauna, which I do quite often, it's going to be a number of seconds before the dog follows. She likes to be around me because we got a bond, but she loves being in that sauna. Yeah, she really digs it.
Animals also have the mitochondria, so they all.
Yeah, and I feel good when she's in there. I'm like, oh, right on. And then she'll, after a little while, if she gets too hot, she knows if she starts panting, she'll leave. Mm-hmm. But she can stay in there. Pretty much, since sessions are about 20 minutes in your sauna, I tend to do like 5 minutes on each side. I do like a 4-turn, basically, front, side, back, side, front kind of thing. And she'll usually stay for the whole time. But on saunas, for people that are like, I want a sauna or I have one, this is like in the sauna industry, and I'm sure you've noticed this, being someone that manufactures and sells your own sauna, there's a lot of competitiveness and like shit slinging in the industry. It's like there are
also in the red light therapy industry.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the red light people, very territorial. Sauna people, very territorial. Water filtration, kind of the same way. Yeah. There's a few things, and I'm like, there's plenty of customers for everyone, guys. First, like, calm down. But when it comes to saunas, like if somebody pressed me, like, what's the number one sauna? I don't think I could answer that because it sort of depends on the purpose and kind of the set and setting. So I love barrel saunas outside. I haven't had one because it's the first time I bought a house, but I'm going to research. By the way, anyone listening, or if you know this, Brian, I'm looking for the most badass barrel sauna for an outdoor scenario. So please shoot me a message if you think you found one that's low EMF and meets all of the things. But barrel saunas are super cool because you can fit 6 people in there. You can hang out at a barbecue and do ice baths.
That's the European sauna experience.
Yeah,
it's very social. You go there.
It's cool. Yeah. And, there's issues with the EMF probably from the heating coil. There are some fire heated ones that you actually like put wood in there,
Wood in.
wood burning, right? Those are cool, and like they have the effect of heating the air essentially, right? You get really hot air, 220-degree air, and that heats you up in a different way, and it feels good, like a Russian banya or a Finnish sauna kind of thing, right? And then you have the kind of the gym saunas, the box of rock saunas that are kind of similar to a barrel sauna. A bunch of people can sit in it. It has an electric sort of heating element that heats up the air. Then you have your classical infrared saunas that have heating panels that don't as much heat up the air, but heat up the tissues. And then you have a sauna. Far infrared sauna, sorry.
Yeah.
Then you have your sauna, which is actually using hot lights to heat up the air and the body, which I love. Now, your sauna, I love as like a restorative, reclusive, single person experience. And I'm going to sit in there for a short period of time. And I'm not shitting on your technology. I'm just saying I like different ones for different reasons. I also have a clear light sauna, which I like because I can lay down and just like lounge in there. If you have a big enough one, you could do yoga in there. Whereas yours is, you're having like your own experience for a few minutes. You can't fit 6 friends in there. I guess you could get a custom made one from you guys maybe or something. But I like all the different types of saunas. And beyond that, then you have like the higher dose. People make the sauna blanket, which is awesome because yours is portable, easy to take apart and put together, and it's light enough. You could just literally move it from one room to another if it fit through the door. But the higher dose sauna blanket's super cool because you just wrap yourself up like a burrito and sweat your ass off in some cotton clothing, and you could like take it on a road trip. So I think all the different saunas in my life, whether I have them or use them, kind of have a purpose and have different benefits. And so I don't think there's like a right one. But one thing about them all that is troubling to me is the EMF issue. So even, my clear light sauna I haven't tested it recently, but very low in EMF. They don't say it's 0 EMF because it's not, but when you're plugging something into a wall, it's going to inevitably produce an electric field, a magnetic field, RF in some of the saunas, which annoys the shit out of me. They have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity in them, so you can have your iPod wirelessly. Sauna makers, stop doing that or make it really easy to turn off, please. Then they all kind of have issues with EMF, some to a lesser or greater degree. I've observed some saunas in the industry and in the infrared space have been, how do I say it, dishonest about the levels of EMF in their saunas. Like they'll claim no EMF, but they actually do. So,
or they'll talk about magnetic field and avoid talking about electric field.
Yeah. So I guess, I don't know what the question is. I'm just kind of help people understand that you have a lot of options, and I'm a fan of all types of different saunas. But because you're getting in a sauna to heal, one of my points of contention personally is the EMF issue. And so with other sauna companies that I've, purchased from or work with, I'm convinced that they are as low as they possibly can be, and I feel the benefits outweigh the detriment. But I think what's super cool about what you've done is you've not only like eliminated the EMF as an issue, but created the Faraday sauna on that model at least, where not only is your technology not giving you EMF, it's blocking any EMF in your house or anywhere around.
Yeah.
And even like with this little guy right here, if I got it right, I think you use a shielded or grounded power cable so that this thing is not even blasting you with EMF. So maybe just break down your perspective of the EMF issues with saunas in general.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm a free market guy. I think that you decide what's best for you and you go for it, man. I think I think all saunas, when we talk about sauna reducing all-cause mortality, reducing your risk of dying of all things, that is a function of you getting in there and raising core temperature 3 degrees and then having some sweating going on for 5 or 10 minutes. So all saunas will do that. Actually, so will a hot tub, and so will some other forms of heat therapy. So then for me, it became a question of, well, what is the heat source? Is it this, what, as you described, a fairly inefficient means of heating biological tissue, of using hot air, which can also be oppressive for people? It's a hot temperature. Folks who have autoimmune and MS and other things, they just can't withstand those high air temperatures. It's too uncomfortable, maybe even claustrophobic for them. So then this is sort of the evolution of the sauna. If you set aside the forgotten secret history of the electric incandescent light bath, you had first the wood-fired sauna, and then you came out with the hot rock saunas, and they're cool because from a product development evolution perspective, they look like a wood-fired sauna, but now it's something that you can use electricity to do. You don't have all that hassle, the fire and all the wood and all that stuff. And then they're like, well, this uses a lot of electricity. And so in the 60s, they came out with the far infrared emitter, a long ceramic tube that emits this very low energy, long wavelength infrared called far infrared. That's 3,000 and greater nanometers. So it's not what we do really so much. Although there is some far infrared emission here, we're primarily near. Anyway, so that was really cool. Not only is it dry now, so it's more cozy for people, less claustrophobic for a lot of people. It's a lot more energy efficient. You don't need a 30 amp hardwired electrical connection like the hot rock sauna. You now have something that uses maybe 20 amps or 15 amps. It's something that's more plug and play. And with the lower air temperature and the supposed use of infrared light to heat the body, we have something that's more modern, and more ideal, but they maintain that wood sauna look, right? All of them are these box saunas. They're sort of harkening back to the classic Finnish sauna and the banyas. But they had no concern of EMF back then. And even today, it's an argument. Does this matter? And again, I go back to, a general endorsement of all saunas. If you can get there and get a sweat on, or even if you can't afford a sauna, you can pour the hottest water you can in your bath and get in there and just stay in there until it goes to lukewarm temperature. And you're doing a full body heat therapy of sorts. And that's something anybody could do. Everybody has that at home. So ultimately, that practice of passive sweating, not gym sweating and exercise sweating, this passive sauna style of sweating promotes all of these benefits for sure. And I would advocate that all of that is way better than not using any sauna. And I also totally agree with you. This whole, all these natural health companies attacking each other. It's like, guys, we're on the same side here. It's conventional medicine and the pharmaceutical stuff. That's where the billions and trillions of dollars, and they have all the marketing money and they have all of the market share. And like, we're fighting over crumbs over here when we should be on the same side and realizing, look, for lifestyle and other reasons, yeah, people want particular products. So for example, with saunas, back to the EMF issue, we didn't understand that man-made electromagnetism may be actually damaging to our health. And so we do now. And we particularly do now because we have so much man-made EMF. Really, the cell phone technology is the most ubiquitous by far. And with 5G, absolutely. But 5G also resulted in an increase of the 4G frequency. So we just have so much wattage now that it really is this ubiquitous thing that's all around. But even before wireless EMF technology, wireless microwave signal, we had electricity. And that's an interesting history. We don't have probably much time left to talk about that. But the advent of electricity correlates with development of disease. That's really interesting.
Like the invisible rainbow.
Yeah.
Book.
Exactly what I'm talking about.
People reference that all the time, and I kind of get the basic tenets of it, but I've not read it, admittedly.
They're just, our sickness and our lack of wellness, our ill health is really rose a lot when we started using electricity, which allowed us to be indoors more, avoiding the sun more. And also with electricity, we don't have to use fire anymore to heat our food, which is very convenient and very great. But when we had fire in our food, we would take the ashes of the fire and put it in our garden. Everybody had their own personal home garden. You grew that, and you had a really rich mineral source that was giving you more nutrients. And now the food is less nutrifying than ever. It's like empty of vitamin and nutrient and rare earth mineral content. And so these are all kind of subtle aspects of modernity and of advancing technology that are more and more stress and more pressure on our health, and are removing more and more of the healthy aspects of our ancestral lives. So anyway, electricity also causes EMF stress. It's low frequency, 60 hertz voltage. And so anything that's electrical produces an electric field, and then the magnetic field is produced in a perpendicular direction in a cylinder around it. And it reduces dramatically as you get away from the electrical source. But if you're close to it, you're getting an electric field stress and magnetic field stress. So first of all, when I realized all this and it wasn't beginning of the SaunaSpace, I was like, well, what do I do? How do I deal with that? So first of all, yeah, using shielded power cords is very helpful. So we're basically trapping the voltage, the micro voltage that leaks out of a conductor that's has electricity going through it, the power cable, and we're wrapping that in metal, and then we're adding more grounding systems to drain out that leaky voltage that's going all over the place and draining it out through the ground wire of the electrical device. That's the way a shielded power cord works. But additionally, there was a couple of tricky issues with this technology in terms of the EMF mitigation. One was internal shielding of the internal wiring. So I have kind of a cool proprietary internal design to keep electric field and magnetic field from coming outward from the internal wiring. But then I was like, okay, we figured all that out, but what about the filament itself? Like, that's how the light's made. It has electricity running through this tungsten metal filament that's heating up really hot and emitting the incandescent light that we crave and that heals us. But guess what? Voltage, electric field, comes out like 3 feet off of that bulb.
Oh, wow.
And so you shielded all the cord, you shielded all the panel, all this, and you have this electric field that's like jumping out and electrifying the user. And this is micro voltage stuff. And those of you, by the way, who are skeptical of this, the American Cancer Association considers over 40 or 50 microamps to be carcinogenic. And so and that's amperage. You're getting a lot more of this stress than that from your average electricity all around your home. And it's absolutely, even mainstream science and medicine understands that to be very damaging to our body. So that led to the Faraday guard here that you see in front of you. And you have the first gen or the second gen over there, but this is
this mesh that goes around it.
Yeah, and so you can see,
for those watching,
we can show folks on the TV real quick while we're
bring it over to that camera there.
So, like I said, all the shielding and the power cord and take care of all the EMFs there didn't do anything for the bulb itself. So I created this first generation of this cage. Had more like a mesh on the front. It was more grilled and it was open. You could stick your fingers in more. And that was just to protect the user from touching the bulb, which is very hot. So just a basic safety design stuff.
I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah. So and especially yeah, if you don't have this, if you just have this in a chicken lamp or something.
I hit my knee up against one of them when I was getting out of your sauna one day. I mean, I didn't burn myself bad, but I was like, oh, don't keep your leg there for longer.
Yeah, and so what I did is I made this a grounded Faraday cage too, so that it actually traps the electric field that's coming off the filament and drains it out through the ground so that you can sit in front of it, benefit from all this light, and there's no longer voltage stress coming out of this. And I can measure this, I have on Instagram and stuff, you can see, you can use a body voltage meter. There's cheap ones out there that you can get from like Safe Living Technologies, has a really cool kit. And then you can use more expensive ones like what I have. And you can measure the body's voltage. And this is the key. Like, what is the influence on the body? And is it measurable? And for all these people who are like, oh, this is foo-foo and all this stuff, there's no science behind it. There's no empirical validation of it. Yes, absolutely there is. You measure the body's voltage, inside and outside the Faraday. And you'll see it's like, a couple thousand volts per meter on the outside. And you go inside and the measurement of the body's voltage immediately drops to zero. And also with this, if you test it in an environment that is, doesn't have any other EMF in it, so you can isolate the signal, and you measure just a regular bulb, you have voltage that comes out 2 or 3 feet. And then if you measure, what I have here with the Photon, with all these EMF mitigation technologies, there's no emission at all of electric field, and magnetic field emission only comes about 2 or 3 inches off the panel. So for the first time ever, the human is not under the influence of the undesirable voltage stress from the electrical device and gets the full benefit at the same time of this light and this heat. And so I first dealt with the EMF mitigation in our technology itself. Like, SaunaSpace don't bring any EMF to the party anymore. But I felt like that wasn't enough. And so that's actually started part of my story of meeting Mr. Brian Hoyer of Shielded Healing. Is he was like, dude, you should make this a Faraday, the whole thing. And I was like, huh. And then the first thing I did is I developed a the bamboo mat inside the sauna is actually a grounding mat. It has conductive shielding technology in it that's grounded electrically to the light panel. And there's several generations of that came out. Now it's a lot more slick how it connects and stuff. I think you have the new design where it's just one little cable connects to the mat, really simple.
Yeah.
And so that it turns out the grounding mat pretty much killed like 90, almost 100% of all the wired electric field stress you get from the wired electricity in all homes that we have that, don't have shielded wiring. But then I was like, what if we could block it all out, dude? Make the whole thing a grounded Faraday cage.
Turn it to 11.
Yeah,
minus 11.
This is the 33rd level right here, right? And so we, the first generation, it was like 3 different fabrics that were combined together. It was really complicated, really expensive to make. It was a really pain in the butt, actually. But I got on the path of developing my own fabric, basically. And so now today, like what you have, the 3rd or 4th generation Faraday, now it's the world's only certified GOTS organic shielding fabric. So it's 35% silver by weight. So it's expensive. It's got a lot of silver in it. It's 10 to 12 micron micro silver cabling that's woven with organic cotton, and it's washed too. So you can with a special like pH neutral detergent, you can actually wash. It's like a machine washable organic shielding fabric, the world's first, really. And also the issue with the first generation Faradays, I'm kind of wandering here a little bit, but the issue with those was they're not blocking enough for 5G and 4G. They're first gen shielding materials, and they're just not up to snuff with regard to the modern wattages we have. So that led to me to basically put a lot of silver into the fabric that I eventually developed, to an extent that it blocks out. And I have third-party lab testing actually on my website, on the blog. You can see that, where it blocks out not just 4G, which is really the most ubiquitous actually that we still have nowadays, but also it does pretty damn well in blocking out these new high frequency 5G signals that as we discussed before, go up to 30 gigahertz. So essentially the idea was, well, hey, if you can have a grounded Faraday cage environment and then you can go in there, it's going to be a more therapeutic session, a more effective session, not because of all this high level, it's an ancestral space and it's pre-technology in there and you get to relax and you get to escape from things. It actually is a measurable thing. You wouldn't meditate in a polluted space, right? And so in the same vein, why would you want to do healing therapy in a therapeutic space? So even though all saunas are good and the most important thing, if you have any access to any, do it and use it and you're going to improve, dude. You're going to be better. But can we optimize that experience? Can we make it just from a therapeutic perspective, maybe not an aesthetic or visual or social perspective, in terms of sauna use and what you're looking for, just purely like biological, therapeutic, optimal effectiveness. Ideally, we would be protected from any unnatural, synthetic, man-made environmental stress of any kind. And so I'm a big believer that one of those is the voltage stress, the EMF stress that we have, but I also think it's blue light stress. So you got many saunas that are like really luxurious and sexy looking, have glass windows. And when I'm at my house,
or tons of like blue
well, right, they have the
lights and stuff
right, they just add in those EMF causing things, the stereo speakers and all that crap. But also even without that, when you have glass doors and you're looking out into the stressful world, if you have a family, like your kids are running around, the TV's going, it's not only letting blue light in, it's letting more sources of nervous stress in, EMF and the rest. Right. So it's stimulation of light, stimulation of sound, of course, EMF. So we talked about all that is like, it's just not an ideally ancestral space. The ancestral space is just quiet, not just to the eyes and the sound, but to the senses with the EMF and with all those sources of psychological stress that you have that remind you of work and remind you of the regrets you have of the things you haven't done and the anxieties you have for the things that are coming up in the future, and that I think that detracts to a certain degree from the effectiveness of the therapy, kind of like, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. So that's why I've sort of obsessed and driven my product design in this direction. And then beyond that, for those of you who haven't tried saunas out there, I think very strongly that the light therapy, the photobiomodulation, adding that into the sauna in a biologically relevant way, not a tiny little LED bank of red lights, but like full body, lots of photobiomodulation, hitting every cell of the body in a very impactful, relevant way. It makes the sauna therapy and the detox therapy less stressful. I mean, let's admit it. Sauna therapy does cause stress of the body. You have these things called healing reactions, where you're experiencing the symptoms of a toxin that you're detoxing. And you're always going forward. You're unlocking toxins out of the cells with this heat shock response. But invariably, some of that toxin recirculates in the blood and can be reabsorbed to a certain degree. So some people get blotchy skin. Some people, experience flu-like symptoms, detoxing pharmaceutical residues from their liver. Some people experience hallucinogenic episodes from prior LSD use.
I wish that would happen for me.
But other people have
Talk about a healing session.
Yeah. So it's a known thing, and in the addict world, it's called a detox reaction. They know that in the world of addiction, but that applies to really any chemical stress, any chemical toxin you have in your body, but also there's psychological stress that's in there that's locked in. You have what are called limbic memories. You have the limbic, your middle brain, your mammalian brain is your limbic brain, and your most powerful emotional memories are called limbic memories. And so the brain, there's this book called The Theory of Love or whatever. It's really good. It talks about this, that your memories are like these little patterns and they overlap each other. And you have limbic memories that are these powerful kind of like animal memories, and they're the emotional memories that can trigger other ones. Just like you smell something and it like brings you back to your high school prom. Like the two memories are not connected, but this limbic memory, this mood, emotional memory triggers, some of these other memories. It's the same thing with healing reactions, wherein you can be detoxing a toxin and you will experience memories and psychological traumas that are associated with with that toxin coming into your body originally. So some people like just start crying all of a sudden. Some people get really tired, and some people are like just have these like mental and spiritual, physical releases through the sauna therapy, through the detoxification process. All of that very stressful. So using red light and near infrared light to support and facilitate that detox process and make it less stressful and more effective, we know, kind of with all the cellular pathways, is, I think, a more effective way to do sauna. And then on top of that, if you can block out everything, including all the EMFs with the Faraday, a Faraday concept, I think you have minute per minute the most effective therapy you could possibly do to your body. It's like very much a one-stop rejuvenation machine. And then on top of that, on top of it being less stressy versus other saunas, just from the experiential perspective, I think it's the only thing that works well for people who are really toxic, who have real big issues. Like Dr. Walls has been using my product for a long time. She's a famous internal medicine researcher, the founder of the Walls protocol, sort of in the world of progressive MS. And those people in that world were very skeptical of this concept. They're often told by their conventional medical doctor, you can't do heat therapy. It's too intense for you. You can't heat up your head or whatever. And I have people in that community, customers, who started out with this single light, this photon, just using that on the gut, simulating a sauna experience, just with one light in the living room, and working up such that after a year, they were able to actually get into the sauna with two lights and maybe the curtains open, and slowly building up to be able to get back to what you and I consider a normal session, 20 minutes, 4 or 5 bulbs, and sweating like crazy. So I think in terms of access, for those of you out there who've been heard about the benefits of sauna, but it's you think it's it's too stressful for you, or you're not in a mental or physical condition to do so, I beg to differ. I think that this is an option for you. Having said that, whatever works for you, man, whatever works for you, it's going to be better than taking petroleum-based chemicals to mask symptoms and that whole sort of conventional route for disease. Look, we're in a world here where, set aside the COVID, the viral respiratory disease world stuff, what are the number one and number two causes of death in America?
Heart disease.
Heart disease?
Well, maybe this is number 3 to 5, depending on what year. Medical treatment.
Right. Iatrogenic
Yeah.
death, medical error.
Yeah.
That's it. That's a little controversial, but that's really high up there. But officially, even according to the CDC, number one and number two causes of death are heart disease and cancer. And these are diseases of civilization. These are lifestyle diseases, really. And I'm not a healthcare provider. That's just my perspective as a curious man. But totally avoidable things. Totally avoidable. If we, have these, understand there's like different ways, there's tools to get over this. So I'm all about creating a sauna that everyone can use and will be the most effective, because ultimately people don't want another thing like, oh, I got to do this for my health now, and I got to work at it and all this. People are so stressed out, man, and they're so overwhelmed with their lives, and it's harder and harder to make money, and the world is just crazy right now. And so whatever you can do, I think, to make it accessible and easy is ultimately going to be more successful for in terms of person to person. So
I love it.
That's kind of my approach to the sauna and to the light therapy.
Thank you. Thank you for creating something so cool. Thank you for chatting with me for 2 hours and 39 minutes.
Wow. I can't believe it's been that long.
I know. I knew we would have a good
This was fun.
Because every time I see you out in the world, like, we drop in about, the latest findings that we're discovering here in this realm. And I'm like, oh man, I can't wait till we record. And I think we literally haven't checked back at my notes, but
Did we miss anything?
Probably not. Let me check just to make sure. No. You covered some things without me even having to prompt you, like the Herxheimer reaction. That whole phenomenon was something I wanted to cover, but you did it. Can children use your saunas? We covered all the things.
Yeah, with supervision and all that. A little bit about the SaunaSpace Photon, for example, versus various LED light therapy things. You've seen the Sky Mall hats. You put the red LED light hat on, and back to this competitive nature of the red light therapy world. There was actually a company that wrote an article disparaging the use of this type of incandescent light for light therapy, for photobiomodulation. And I eventually, and you can read about it on my blog.sauna.space, you can read it. And I eventually wrote a response where I argued against it, empirically, an empirical arm against it. And then from a theoretical perspective, and then using measurements, using an irradiance meter, and using spectrometer and stuff like that to argue against it. And so, yeah, it's really crazy how I feel like all of that was just such a silly waste of time, because all of these things are great to fit into your life. LED light therapy can be quite effective, and it's more of a targeted thing. It's more like vitamin C powder. You use it for 10 minutes, really up close, really effective. There's also the Versa laser. It's a cold 732 nanometer laser. So using a very high powered laser level power of near infrared light in a targeted fashion in joints and stuff to promote great responses. Like, people have great success with that.
Yeah, I have one of those lasers, a Power Medic laser. I forget, it's 800 something nanometers, but
it's all using the same concept.
It'll heal the shit out of a cut. Like,
it will, but like
4 times as fast or something.
And so you use that in this like really targeted, really short-term manner. And so for me, again, it's like the vitamin C powder. The Photon, like what we do is the orange, in between those really targeted sessions. You go to your chiropractor, you get fixed up, you get these things. What do you do for your daily maintenance and your repair? And so for me, the broad spectrum light that you can use, you use the sauna, the SaunaSpace sauna, for 20 or 30 minutes. So it's a little bit lower wattage than LED light therapy, but you're using it for 3 times the time. So the overall dose you get is very similar, and maybe better because it's more broad spectrum, more natural. But also with the Photon versus those LED panels, you can't use that LED panel all day. You use it for that intense treatment. And then what do you use for the rest of the day? So for this, it's like that. It's just a different approach to thing. And I think both of them can work well. We have customers that have both.
Oh, I do.
and
I
that's
mean, I
great. Like
I've been using the
you have
Juve
various
lights
things.
for I don't know, many years now.
Hmm.
They've been one of our sponsors. I have them all over the place in the house, and I love them. I use them all the time. But it's a different experience
Yeah,
too, and it's
it
like
is.
has a different purpose. And like for example, I don't get hot in front of it. So if it's like hot in the summer in Texas, I might not have time to do a SaunaSpace session and get all sweaty and have to take a shower. In fact, usually when I use the
Hmm.
Juve panel, it'll be after I already took a shower. I'm just about to get dressed and I'll stand on front of the light with the vibe plate on under me, or
Yeah.
stack it with breathe, my hydrogen inhaler while I'm doing it. Like I'll do a few different things, and it's a nice passive thing that I can kind of stack. But I don't know that, like, if I had to pick one, I even could. They both have different purpose. Or like
Yeah.
if I'm working with methylene blue, then I want that specific unnatural limited bandwidth of 660 nanometers, because that's the one that really reacts most powerfully with methylene blue.
Yeah, that's interesting
Now I'll do
stuff.
methylene blue, and I know yours has some 660 in there because it's like a full red spectrum, but and I'll put it up against my artery with methylene blue in my blood. It's a whole other podcast conversation, but yeah, methylene blue and red light is this whole thing. It's really fascinating. But I like the red light panels because of that, or I'll even like put my skin right
Hmm.
on it, So it's like I think there's a purpose for all of it. Kind of depends on
There is, and ultimately, you just need to try the stuff out, and figure it out
yeah,
for yourself. So that's why I've been really focused from day one on customer success. I want
yeah.
people to be well taken care of. So from the day one, we've always offered a long trial, and that's all I ask is, try it out, see if it
Yeah,
works for you.
what's your deal? I know we got a discount for our folks at sauna.space, and then the Luke 5 code gives them 5% off. What's your deal with like warranty, return policy, all the nuts and bolts if
Yeah,
someone wanted
well,
to
yeah,
go
I give
check
you a
your
little
stuff out?
little salesy thing here at the end.
Yeah.
I just honestly, if you don't like it and you don't want it, I don't want you to have it. So we offer now a 100-day trial, so a 100-day home trial. So you get 3 months
Damn.
to use it out.
Wow.
And if you don't like it, in the United States and Canada, you can return it for free. So it's free shipping and free return pickup. Kind of like those mattress companies,
Yeah, yeah.
sort of
You
thing.
must not get very many returns because that would be expensive.
No, it's interesting that with the long, generous return period, there's less returns because people are less, they get time to try it out. For some people, it takes time to, feel benefit. But then also, yeah, there's a confidence there. People are like, oh, you're willing to stand behind it. Well, yeah, I am. And those of you who don't like it, you return it and go try that LED panel and see if that works for you. Whatever works for you and the thing that you're going to be inclined to use that's convenient and fun for you to use and get good feeling from, that's what you want. So for us, I give you a long time to try it out, the free shipping and stuff. And it's pretty much built to last forever. That's why I like stuff that's like really purpose-driven design that's really durable. So all of our products come with like a 10-year warranty, almost all of them. The EMF shield in the Faraday is a 5-year warranty. But everything else, even the light bulbs themselves. So it is a light bulb, it does fail. So we guarantee those for 2 years of use. If you buy it inside of our product, it's all our thermal light bulbs included with all of them. But
I
the
feel like the first thing I got from you before I had the sauna was just the 4 light panel,
Mhm.
and I still have it with the same bulbs, and I feel like that was like 4 years ago.
Yeah, so the
I
only
mean, I don't leave it
replaceable.
on all day, but like it was in LA, it was in my meditation room, and it was often cold in there too. So I would just set it in front of me and just blast myself with that light in the morning. And I used it pretty much every morning.
Yeah, they last a long. They're rated for like 5,000 hours.
Oh,
So
okay.
for half-hour sauna sessions, that's like I've got customers from 2015 that still have their
Yeah.
not even their thermal light bulbs, just the regular bulbs. So yeah, they last a long time, and that's the only replaceable kind of perishable part of it is the bulb itself. So yeah, that's what I'm all about. It's all handmade in my shop in Missouri, in the flyover state. And it comes with a really robust warranty, and you get to try it out for a long time. And frankly, you're gonna love it if you try it out. And that's the thing that I see at the shows. Just recently we were at the South by show. Is that it's really it's so gratifying for me, even in the short term, to see when people use this technology, this incandescent technology, and all the things that we've talked about, all the design innovations to like make it this optimal experience, it's something where you can pretty immediately feel the benefit. You can feel the difference. And then over time, as you continue to use it, you do have these long-term benefits that you see from the literature, the disease reduction and all that. But it's cool to have something that it's not just this supplement, I take that I've been told it's good. Like you immediately and viscerally feel this is doing something good for me.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that's something that's challenging in terms of money that you spend on supplements, because you don't really know if it's working, especially because it takes some time. You might take something that's great for mitochondria or whatever it is. And it's like, I don't know, there's a lot of placebo in there too. Like, yeah, I'm taking this new thing. I think I have more energy. And so you do have more energy, right? But with something like this, and you're right, at the shows, it's fun to see people like come in your booth and they get all like lit up, no pun intended. But it is something that you get a more immediate subjective experience of. Are you going to be at Paleo Effects this year?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
Back
I don't
in
know if we're
Austin?
planning. I know we're going to the biohacking conference again, and there's the biohacking
In
Congress,
September?
which is different than the Congress.
Well, I asked because I'm going to be there.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if this episode will come out before or after that. I forget on the calendar. But
Are you speaking there?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it'll be
amazing.
my fourth year there. They took a couple years off because of all the things. But what I was going to say is, like, I want to encourage people, if they're at the Biohacking Conference or Paleo Effects or wherever you are, like, come hang out in the booth and every time I've seen you there, you explain some new part of it to me, and then I get to try it out. It's like, with something like this that has to be shipped and can be expensive, it's cool to be able to actually experience it and go in that Faraday thing, leave your phone outside, and watch what happens to your nervous system when you are in the middle of a forest inside a conference.
Especially at the conference,
Yeah,
they're so
'cause-
toxic. We're like this
Yeah.
bubble of happy,
It's
awesomeness.
very cool. It's a neat way to experience it.
Yeah.
So, hot damn, dude, I think we did it. Thank you so much for
Thank you
making
for
the
having
time
me.
to come by, and thank you for making super cool stuff and
Thanks,
sharing
man.
everything behind it. I don't know many people I could geek out in such a nuanced way about these topics. So thank you for indulging me and all
Thank you
my
for having me.
geekiness.
It's been a pleasure, man. It's fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, me
And I
too.
love what you're doing too. So thank you for having me.
Yes, sir.